Uh, Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? Is this working now? Hi. I'm David Pandori. I'm one of the co-chairs. I'm delighted to have the help of Teresa Alvarado this time around. And many of you have been through this process before, but many of you are new too. So this is a very exciting time to be part of this task force, given the very important issues that are going on.
How long will it be?
I've just been advised we're not recording yet, so I have to wait for the recording. So.
We'll start the audio and visual recording in 30 seconds.
Jesse. We're good. Oh, we're good.
We're started.
Yes, we're good.
I'm not going to repeat it again. It wasn't that interesting. So we have a long meeting, but we're covering very important things. We have fresh faces. We have experienced faces. I know Pat Sasato's here. All right. Can you hear me now? Yeah? Better. All right. And we have some younger folks here too. Pat, I had just mentioned your name because I was thinking of you. Weren't you on the General Plan Task Force for Horizon 2000?
I was.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting when you're on a task force planning the future, and that future ended 20 years ago.
I don't know quite how to take that.
We're going to call that experience and perspective.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I'll
Experience and
accept that.
perspective. So, Harvey, nice to see you. So, we don't have food for our meetings, and it's not in the budget, I'm informed. I know there was a question someone had asked about that, so everyone's welcome to bring food. I guess you should have been told that for this meeting. It didn't happen, but you're welcome to bring it to the next meeting. If you bring dessert, it's important to share.
Bring straight cookies, please, if you bring cookies. Jim.
Some of us don't even know what to do.
So I just want to introduce myself as well. I'm Teresa Alvarado, San Jose Director of SPUR. Really wonderful to see all of you. I think this is my third or fourth General Plan Committee, but I love seeing all the new faces. We have several new members of the committee, and so I think, with the folks who has served on a previous General Plan Task Force on this committee, about half, I would say, which is a good group of folks who are familiar with this conversation. Feel free to talk to your neighbor if you have a question. There are no dumb questions, and we want to be able to invite and engage conversation even from the far side of the table. So we will do our best. Leslie and David at the end there, we're watching you, and we'll try to make sure that we engage all of you in this conversation.
Will we do this kind of thing too?
Yeah, we're going to cover all of that. We're going to cover all of that, some of the details shortly, but why don't we start off with this? We're going to go around. I want to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, identify why they're here, how they had the pleasure of being appointed. And, we're all diverse. We all have different viewpoints. We bring unique things, each of us, to this effort. But I think there's one thing that binds us all, and that's a love of San Jose. So when you introduce yourself, why don't you say one thing you like about San Jose, whether it's a person, place, or thing, real, or I guess it could be imaginary too, because we're here for planning and we're dealing with imagination. So, Michelle, you want to lead us off?
Oh, 1 second. I just want everyone to be aware. Take maybe 10 seconds or 15 to go around the table. There's limited time. I want to do some housekeeping. We have restrooms when you go out the doors to the left, as well as you can go out down the hallway to the right near the elevators. Parking validators in the back. You can access it during the break or at the end of the meeting. And inside your binders, there's a ethics form. Please sign it and return it to staff by the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Michelle?
Do
I have to press the button? No, it's
No.
live. I'm Michelle Yesney. I'm currently a member of the Planning Commission. My claim to fame is that I prepared the EIR for the general plan we're currently reviewing many years ago, and I'm proud of that. And I like living in San Jose because it was a great place to raise my daughter.
I'm Linda Lazat, currently the chair of the Santa Clara Valley Water District, former council member. This is my third tour on this task force, and the thing I love about San Jose. Oh, I just wanted to see if you were all awake. I wanted to see if you were awake. The thing I love about San Jose, it's where I met my husband.
I'm Harvey Darnell. I was appointed by the mayor as the neighborhood organization member. And what I really like about San Jose is, and this is my fourth time if you counted the council as well, which was the predecessor to that general plan. What I love about San Jose is the diverse communities.
Nice.
Hi, my name is Smita Patel, and I was appointed by our District 2 council member, Sergio Jimenez, to represent our district. I've lived in San Jose since I was 7. I went to San Jose State, and I think the thing I like most about it is that it's home, and the people who are here are family.
And I'm Pat Sacedo, former council member. Yes, I have served on several general plan task force and committees. Currently, I represent here at this table the Building Industry Association. We build housing. So what I like most about San Jose, one of the things is it has been a great community when I raised my children, and we lived in one of those suburban neighborhoods, which was a great place to raise a family.
Good evening. I'm Kiyomi Honda Yamamoto. I'm the South Bay Regional South Bay Advocacy Manager for Greenbelt Alliance. We are an environmental nonprofit that takes a holistic approach to both protecting open space and promoting smart infill growth. I'm really excited to be part of this task force. I'm a fourth-generation San Jose resident, so happy to support the city that's given us so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nate LeBlanc. I'm with the San Jose Downtown Association. This is my first time doing anything like this. The thing I like about San Jose is the easy access we have to different types of cuisine.
My name is Melanie Griswold. I'm currently the vice chair on the Planning Commission. I am excited to be here. It's my first time on the task force. I really like the weather here in San Jose. I'm from Canada, so I love the weather, but I also really love the Rose Garden, which is a few blocks from my house.
Hi, I'm Kevin Zwick, and I'm the CEO of Housing Trust Silicon Valley. We're a nonprofit community loan fund that works to create affordable housing throughout the entire Bay Area. I was on the task force last time, so excited to be on it again and bring a perspective about the need of affordable housing and the housing crisis we're in. And my favorite thing about San Jose is going to Avaya Stadium when the Earthquakes win.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jesus Flores. I'm president of the Alum Rock Santa Clara Street Business Association. This is my first time in here. And what I love about San Jose is all of our people.
Good evening. My name is Andre Lutard. I'm with the Preservation Action Council of San Jose. We are a historic preservation nonprofit. We strive to preserve our historic architecture for the betterment of San Jose and create visual interest of San Jose. My favorite part about San Jose is the Bank of Italy building.
My name is Tomika Rest. I was appointed by District 3 Councilman Morales. I'm from the Japantown neighborhood, president of the Japantown Business Association and the Farmers Market. I'm fifth generation Japantown. I'm just honored to continue being a part of the neighborhood where my ancestors chose to place roots.
Cool.
Hi, my name is Asen NDI. I do housing and transportation policy at Working Partnerships USA. We're a community labor alliance that works to build a just economy that works for everyone. I really love First Friday.
Hi, I'm Roberta Moore. I was appointed by Councilmember District 10, Johnny Camus. What I love most about San Jose is my daughter not only embraces diversity because of growing up here, she prefers it.
Eric Schoenauer. I think I'm here because I have some experience with land use and development. What I like about San Jose is my family's been here for 6 generations since 1858, so we have a deep sense of roots in the city.
Good evening, my name is Sam Ho. I'm appointed by the Office of the Mayor originally a few years ago. And privileged to be able to serve on this task force to together make a better San Jose for all of us. And I'm currently a Director of Communications, Community Relations, and Diversity at San Jose Evergreen Community College District.
Good evening. I'm Leslie Corsilia. I am Executive Director of Silicon Valley at Home, which is a housing policy and advocacy organization working for housing for all in the Silicon Valley. And I have not been on this committee before, but I worked for the city for 24 years, and so I'm pretty familiar with the general plan and our housing policies here. And I would say there's a lot about San Jose that I really love, and the people would be my choice.
I'm David Beeney, the Executive Director for the Building and Construction Trades Council. I appreciate San Jose for its feeling of being in the center, both geographically and figuratively. We're between the ocean and the mountains, surfing and skiing. We also have a big city or a rural area. We can get to just about anywhere from here.
I'm Margie Matthews. I'm a former council member, and I was also, after that, the executive officer of the Los Angeles Parks Department, and then the director of affordable housing for Santa Clara County. So I have lots of interests. I love San Jose, every bit of it, but right now that I'm retired, I love the East Foothills.
Good evening, Eddie Trung with the Silicon Valley Organization. We're the Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I love San Jose because I was born and raised here. I lived in Evergreen for about 20 years. I had thought about leaving, but I decided against it, so you're stuck with me.
Good evening, my name is Luis Arguello with the Labor's International Union of North America, and I love San Jose because I was born and raised here as well, lived in the east side of San Jose. Thank you.
I'm Sean Milligan. I'm District 6 representative and I don't know, 30-year resident of District 6. I'm a principal with KT Urban based out of Cupertino, and I'm proud to be a longtime resident of San Jose.
Hello, Vince Rocha. I'm with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. I work on housing and land use policy there. I live in District 3 in Japantown. My family is from the east side, although I was born in Santa Clara, but I do love San Jose. And my favorite thing about San Jose is its diversity, and part of that diversity is here. I'm glad to see around this table.
Michael Van Avery, Republic Urban Properties, the San Jose local builder. Born and raised here, 3rd generation. What I love most about San Jose, it's become Christmas town in a very few amounts of days.
Hi, I'm Susan Butler Graham, resident of District 9. Thank you, Pam. And I'm a retired bilingual teacher. I'm a member of Mothers Out Front, working for a livable climate for all children. And my favorite things about San Jose are the open spaces, hiking, the diverse people, and the lively arts community.
Good evening, Jim Zito, representing Evergreen Elementary School District, 3rd time around on the 2040 task force, 2-term planning commissioner. And what I love most about San Jose is ditto on 99% of what I've heard, but also the inclusivity, the ability for people like ourselves, like the regular residents to be able to participate in such a function like this?
I'm Bonnie Mace. This is my second go-around. I've also been a redistricting commissioner and a housing commissioner, so quite a few. And I'm representing District 8, Sylvia Reynes's district. And what I love about San Jose is Michael's socks. So we are very fashion-forward in San Jose, and it's exemplified by our wonderful Michael here.
Hi, I'm Carl Lee. I'm a realtor. I was on the initial 2040 task force representing the Chinese American Real Estate Association. I'm active still with the local, state, and national realtor associations and have been on a number of housing committees at the state level. I left San Jose for 4 years for college, going back east, immediately came back, grew up in San Jose, and still a resident of Berryessa. I'm going to go to the other major sports arena from Kevin. My favorite place is the Shark Tank.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Su. I'm the Executive Director of the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy, the very new Executive Director. My favorite part of San Jose is the welcoming aspect of it and the opportunity to do impactful work. I came here in 2011 to study at San Jose State, where I actually currently teach. And in my experience here, I've really found the people to be really welcoming.
Good evening, Ray Bramson. I was appointed by Councilmember Maya Esparza. I think what I love most of all about San Jose is our potential in the future to provide housing for everyone who needs it.
My name is Shiloh Ballard. I'm the Executive Director of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. I grew up in West San Jose, then bought a townhome with my mom in South San Jose, and then moved to downtown San Jose, District 6, right near the Diridon station. Ditto on basically everything that's been said. Oh, I also chair the Planning Commission, but I was put here for the Bike Coalition. Oh, what I love about San Jose right now is all the great bike lanes. Yes.
Anything else? No? Okay. Good evening. My name is Don Little. I'm with Trammell Crow Company. I've lived in the Bay Area all my life. I've done business in San Jose for over 30 years. I think that it's an interesting question. What do you like most about San Jose? Ditto. But I think the diversity is phenomenal. I think the scale of the city is important. And I think the stage of the city now, the potential in front of us is just so immense, so challenging, and so exciting. So it's all those things together. Thank you.
My name is Jessie O'Malley Solis, and I represent the Valley Transportation Authority. I've been working on transit-oriented development in San Jose for almost 20 years. My favorite thing about the city of San Jose is the grit and problem-solving skills of its people.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'm Pam Foley, council member representing District 9. My favorite thing has to be District 9. But okay, beyond that, it's really the willingness of so many people in the city of San Jose to step up and volunteer and work to make San Jose a better place.
Teresa Alvarado again. In addition to everything you all said, I would add two more things. Alum Rock Park, our state's first municipal park, and San Jose State, our state's first institution of higher instruction.
Good evening. I'm Rosalind Huey. I am the director of the Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. And I think one of the things that I love about San Jose is I get to work with so many dedicated people, community organizations, business organizations, so many different advocates here in the city. And I'm also thankful that I have a great team at PPCE to work with. And with that, I'm going to ask Michael Brio, who is one of our deputy directors, to introduce our team, who you're going to be working with over the next several months. So, Michael, if you could quickly just introduce everyone, including our city attorney representative.
Sure. So I'm Michael Brio, the guy with the socks. Usually the guy with the ties also, but socks today. And shoot. Yeah, so this is Vera Todoroff, who is our attorney who's assigned to our team. She'll be telling you about some exciting stuff in a moment. And then we have Kulon Pham, who's the senior planner 4, leading this team. And then Jared Hart, our division manager on citywide planning. And we have Robert Rivera, who's also on the four-year review team, and Jessica Sitiawan, thank you, who's also on our four-year review team.
Okay. So we've got a lot to cover. I didn't say what I like about San Jose, but I'm going to wait till the end of the meeting for that. Yeah, I'll keep it in suspense. I was a former council member for District 3. It was quite a while ago. I'll tell you how long ago it was. It was so long ago that Tomiko Rast was a little kid. So we're going to start off now with task force roles and responsibilities, as well as a presentation from our representative from the City Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my name is Kyulon Pham, and I'll go over the schedule, roles, and responsibilities. The overview of the general plan and the four-year scope will be presented by Michael Brio. Before that, Vera, our city attorney, will be presenting the Brown Act. Jared Hart will be presenting the four-year progress report. And Jessica Sithiawan will be going the overview of the urban village and staff recommendations. And followed by that, there will be a task force discussion and public comment period. And all of this will be in the agenda in your binders. So the task force began with the City Council approval of the scope of work back in June 2019. And since July through December, staff and our consultants have begun the background analysis and development of preliminary recommendations. Prior to each task force meeting, you will receive a memo, and any member of the public, if you wish to be on the same email distribution list, please send us an email at generalplanstaff@sanjoseca.gov, and we'll definitely respond to you and provide the actual task force materials. Right now, we're in the task force meeting time frame, November through April. And followed by that, we have the environmental analysis under the California Environmental Quality Act. That will start from April and through September. And finally, we'll move on to the public hearings, planning commission, and city council hearings. Now, I really want to emphasize with you that this is a very, very tight schedule, and we really need the task force meeting to provide the recommendation in a timely manner so we can do our follow-up analysis. So task force members' responsibilities. We really need you to review the materials and be prepared for the meeting themselves. We understand that there's a lot of materials to go through. You can definitely email us for any clarification kind of questions and moving on forward, or basically if any planning related questions, if we could, within the confinements of the Brown Act, we'll definitely reply and respond back to you as soon as possible. You need to regularly attend meetings. There are no alternates and no substitutes from now moving forward. One absence is allowed. Follow the four-year review schedule. Follow the task force ground rules. Those are also in your binder, and I'll go over them in a moment in another slide. Now, the task force has a limited scope. That means there's no revisions that will require an environmental impact report analysis. And there will be no changes to the general plan land use designations for any specific areas. And each member shall have one vote. So the task force ground rules: start and end meetings on time, as best as we can. Everybody participates, be open, listen actively, raise your hand when you wish to speak, and definitely planning staff will help our co-chairs to filter out the speakers in a timely manner. Another suggestion is, especially for those who are on the far edges, to put your name card on the side so we can definitely see that you wish to speak at that time. Let me demonstrate like this on the side. So we'll definitely.
Why don't we make that the only way? Instead of some people raising their hands and some people doing that, let's just use that.
Sure.
Consistently.
On the side.
Thanks.
Stay focused on the topic at hand and raise any issues or concerns. And I'll pass it off to Vera to speak about the Brown Act.
Good evening. Do you have that on there? They change colors. My name is Vera Todorov. I'm with the City Attorney's Office. I've been with the city for 17 years, much of it representing the Planning Department, and I also represent the Planning Commission. I've been advising staff and the council on the general plan, on this current general plan since prior to its adoption. I wanted to talk to you about the Ralph M. Brown Act. The Brown Act, many of you are are current or former elected officials or current or former appointees to city commissions. So I apologize for repeating some information that you've probably already received, but it's important to do so. The purpose of the Brown Act, is to provide the public with access to the decision-making process of local legislative bodies. This is a local legislative body. You are making recommendations to the City Council on changes to a very important document, the general plan. That is a legislative function of the city. So you are subject to the Brown Act. The policy declaration in the Brown Act is extremely important. It says, and I'm sorry I'm repeating this, the public commissions, boards, and councils, and the other public agencies in this state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people insist on remaining so informed so they may retain control over the instruments they've created. So discussions on matters that you are going to have as a task force member need to happen openly in this room at a publicly agendized meeting, not outside of this room. The public needs to be able to hear what you are saying, and all of you need to hear what each other are saying as well. The Brown Act applies to meetings of legislative bodies, which you are. I am not going to get into this much because I already told you you are not the governing body of a local agency, but you are a commission that is subject to the Brown Act. What is a meeting? A meeting is a gathering of a majority of the legislative body. I'm informed that you have 42 members, so a meeting requires a quorum of 22 members, and that is how many people it takes to take action. And it's a meeting is a quorum, 22 members, of this body at the same time and place like we are here tonight. And the purpose is to receive information, discuss an issue, or take any action. So remember, you're not just having a meeting if you're taking action. It's if you're receiving information and you're discussing an issue also that will come before this body. It's not just taking action. There are a couple of exceptions that are not going to matter to you because you can have conferences or meetings that you might go to as long as there's no discussion of specific issues among yourselves, or purely social or ceremonial gatherings so long as specific business is not discussed. So again, the prohibition is that you cannot discuss the business of this task force outside of this room, particularly if there's a quorum. So if you go to a conference, a meeting, let's say it's one of your different agencies is having a meeting in the sense of being discussed, can't be there, you're on the task force, you need to leave. Purely ceremonial gatherings are social. You go to a party or something, people want to talk to you, don't speak about this. You can't talk about it, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. Serial meetings of this commission, of all commissions, are prohibited. What that means is, a serial meeting is a series of communications between individual members or groups of members of the commission that ultimately involve a majority. And the ultimately involve a majority is important. I'll explain that in a moment. It's regarding a specific issue to be addressed by the body, to develop a concurrence on an action to be taken by the body. So let me give you an example from two planning commissioners or something that I know. Jim might call Melanie, right? And have a discussion about something. That's okay, it's only two people. But you may start talking to others about it, or you may have 3 or 4 people who decide, let's go get a drink after a task force meeting. Let's have dinner before, we're hungry, let's plan on meeting. That meeting among maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 people or more you start talking to other people, and you can't control who those other people at that meeting or at your dinner, who they're going to be talking to. And before you know it, 22 people may have the same information and you have violated the Brown Act because you've spoken in an attempt to get ideas or concur on where something should go. There really is no other reason you'd probably be talking about it, unless you wanted to talk about some resolution or some issue that you see. So the communications also involve face-to-face meetings, emails, text messages, phone calls, social media, and the use of personal intermediaries. I'm going to have my assistant call and find out what so-and-so thinks about this and that. Those are social intermediaries or personal intermediaries. Or someone hits up your spouse or significant other and tells them, I want your wife or your, or person to vote a different way or to vote a certain way. That happens as well. So, or where you have meetings where people call a group of people intending to find a certain result or influence you in a certain way. It is of particular concern with a group this large. When we have, commissions of 7 people or so, people remember that more because, you know when you've spoken to a couple of people or what's happened, or they limit that more. Our major problems in the city have actually occurred, in my experience, with groups this large. And we had one attempt many, many years ago where people wanted to start a web page to talk to each other and do that stuff. We stopped that. We've had people attempt to, tweet, do all kinds of things, and before you know it, you have a quorum, looking at that. Plus, it creates a very, very negative public record that you do not want. These folks in the audience, people who have an interest in this, an interest in an open public hearing, there are a lot of people out there who critique what we do as cities and what commissions do and what public agencies do. Please do not be the subject of that kind of criticism. So I'm just warning you, really, really be careful, particularly about serial meeting prohibitions. It's extremely important prohibition to remember. With regard to open meetings, again, no action on items can be taken unless they're properly agendized and posted. Regular meetings are generally posted by state law, 72 hours. Special meetings within 24 hours. The city for this type of committee, I believe, has a 7-day requirement. The agendas need to have a clear description of the issue to be discussed. Planning is good at doing that. There needs to be a public opportunity to speak. So that's why you see, public comments on items not on this agenda. Plus, they have to have an opportunity to speak on every item that is on the agenda as well. And the meetings have to be held within the jurisdiction. I'm not worried about that. We're not going to be holding our meetings in Santa Cruz. There are closed meeting exceptions, and I have to say that none of these will probably apply to this particular task force. The only time that I have ever had to take any body like this other than the city council, into a closed session was with the planning commission where someone had attempted to enjoin their action at that night meeting. And I had to show up in court that morning to fight it. And they needed to know that that occurred and that they had the right to move forward with what they were doing. So, because that was the decision of the court at the time. But I don't expect that to happen here unless somebody perhaps, alleges something is going wrong, but I don't think that's going to occur. The importance of the Brown Act is such that there are criminal sanctions. It is actually a misdemeanor, punishable as a misdemeanor, if a member of a body like this attends a meeting where a violation occurs. Remember, the meeting can be dinner at Flames. They intend to deprive the public of information, and they know that the public was entitled to receive such information. So you're having this session right now because you're going to know that the public might be entitled to information if you do any of this. Civil remedies are, and this is what usually happens if there's a Brown Act action, there's an invalidation of the action. So whatever you do becomes invalid. A person complaining of that will make a written demand to cure the violation to the city. And if corrective action is not taken within 30 days, then they can proceed to court. And one of the things that, and so the good thing to know if there is a violation and it's discovered, a decision to do a corrective action, which means to take the vote again, like on a recommendation for this board, the inference that it was cured, it doesn't say that it was unlawful. You're off the hook if you're able to do that. If something was done, something was not on the agenda, for example, and you voted on it. With regard to enforcement, the civil remedies are that the court can issue an injunction for prospective relief can be obtained. And they don't have to prove that there was a knowing violation for this remedy. And they can do it without a demand for a cure for the alleged violation. The Brown Act gives broad authority for courts to impose an order sufficient to stop and prevent violations. So, for example, if a court determined, if someone complained that our agendas never correctly described what we were speaking about in this task force, someone could file with the court. It doesn't have to be knowledgeable, it just can be sloppy that we're not doing the agenda correctly. And they can demand a cure, and the court can order that. And they can order attorney's fees. And for the violations that may be worse than that, they can also do a prospective cure, for example. For example, if you have one member that is consistently, speaking out of order or trying to get a consensus of people, and someone discovers that, you could go to court and they could attempt to remedy that in some manner, like perhaps you're not on the task force anymore, or whatever the appropriate remedy is. So I just wanted to inform you that the importance of the Brown Act, because your actions need to be taken in public. Everyone needs to hear the same information at the same time, people's comments and concerns about, proposals that you may hear. Very, very important to all be done in public. And so I encourage you all to keep that in mind with every action that you take with regard to the task force. Thank you. And we have another item that I wanted to discuss with you as well, which is conflict of interest law under the Political Reform Act. And the Political Reform Act requires that public officials not have a financial interest in the outcome of the decisions that they are being asked to make. And what I wanted to do is just go over this one section of the government code in the Political Reform Act that talks about, lists basically what conflict of interest are. And I don't expect you to know whether or not you have a conflict of interest. The purpose in doing this is for you to issue spot whether you might. And so, there are rules and regulations that refine this, but if you discover that you may have any of these issues, please contact me through the planning department. They will forward your questions to me. And so the first is, it basically says, and I'm going to read this and explain a bit. A public official has a financial interest in a decision if it is reasonably foreseeable that the decision will have a material financial effect, distinguishable from its effect on the public generally, on the official, a member of his or her immediate family, or on any of the following. The first item A is any business entity in which the public official has a direct or indirect investment worth $2,000. So if a decision here is being made that would somehow affect your business entity, anything to do with it in a way that is worth $2,000, and the $2,000 would be an increase in value as well as a decrease in value. It can go either way. You may have a conflict of interest that would prohibit you from being in the decision-making process on that item. Second, B here is any real property in which the public official has a direct or indirect interest worth $2,000 or more. So that would include, for example, your residence, whether you own it, whether you lease it, whether you have a license to use some property for a particular purpose, whether you have an easement over some property that would be affected by this. It can be any type of property interest. Third, any source of income, with the exception of gifts or loans by a commercial lending institution made in regular course of business. So your home mortgage doesn't count, or your student loan. If it aggregates $500 or more in value, provided, promised to, or received by the public official within 12 months prior to the time when the decision is made. So you have to go back a year and take a look. Have you received gifts or any kind of income from someone of $500 or more? And will it affect the person who gave you the money in any way, the person or entity that did. Fourth, and this is one that comes up quite often, any business entity in which the public official is a director, officer, partner, trustee, employee, or holds any position of management. So if it affects the business entity where you hold any of those positions, then again, you may have a conflict of interest. Last, any donor of or intermediary agent or donor of a gift or gifts aggregating $250 or more in value provided to, received by, or promised to the public official within 12 months prior to the time the decision is made. So, for example, you got a gift from someone, you didn't reciprocate it in any way, you just got a gift, and it was $250. By city ordinance, I believe it's $50 that we have to be careful about, but you get a gift. And then all of a sudden, 9 months later, you discover you're here on the task force, and something that the task force is recommending uniquely impacts this person who gave you the gift, or the business that gave you the gift. We need to talk about whether or not it is a conflict of interest. It might be or it might not be. And again, you may also have indirect investments or financial interests that are owned by your spouse or dependent child, or by an agent on behalf of a public official, or by a business entity or trust in which you have direct, indirect, or beneficially a 10% interest or greater. Where this comes up probably most often is interest by your spouse or by businesses that you have or your spouse may have and their clients. And so, obviously, community property interest in your spouse, that's a 50% community property interest under California law. So, their income, for example, from their employer, you have a 50% interest in. So you may have to disqualify yourself if something impacting your spouse's employer comes up that would cause a change. So I just wanted to give you kind of a list of what you need to look for. I honestly don't think that the general plan amendments are usually so broad that this doesn't really, that you are not going to have any conflicts, but you never know, and you never know how this may uniquely impact maybe a small group of businesses, a small group of entities, or a small group of people, the decisions that you're making, and you may be connected to them in some way that would create a conflict of interest. So anyway, please, if you have any questions about this or any legal questions, please direct them to the Planning Division, and they will direct them to me, and I can respond to that. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay. I think next, Michael, are you presenting?
Yeah.
All right.
Do you want me to just sit there, Keelan, so I can do this side? Okay. My setup, where is it?
David? Teresa, David, I did have a question. Can we ask questions? I have my little thing up and I don't think you saw it.
Sorry, didn't see
Okay.
that.
Vera, just a couple of clarifications. I should know the Brown Act pretty well, but what I thought I heard you say is that we can't talk among ourselves, and I mean, the council can. The council has what they call a Brown Act, and so if there were like 5 of us who wanted to form a Brown Act, we can't. Is that one thing you're saying? And then the second thing is, can I bring this conversation to my board? I do have board members who are at this table, but obviously as a policy and advocacy organization, we are very interested in this general plan, and so I just, I'm curious about those two things.
The prohibition is on a quorum, a majority of this body, getting information outside of the hearing process, the agendized hearing process. So yes, you can go back to your board. This is a public meeting. You can give your board whatever information. But if it ends up with 21 more members of this task force, that's the problem. And the emphasis is that you really don't have control over that information getting out, or your opinion getting out, or the action that you may want to take getting out. And that's why I'm suggesting to be extremely prudent and extremely conservative about the communications that you have outside of this hearing format. Of course you're going to speak to people, 1 or 2, But when it becomes almost a game of telephone, right?
No, I
That's the
understand
problem.
seriatim meetings, but I thought I heard you say don't talk to anybody, and I think that, you know, it's good for us to be able to throw things off each other, so I just wanted to make sure.
I agree, but to the extent that you can't control that discussion and that it needs to be here, I might also mention ancillary, that if you do have, and you do collect any information outside of this room, there is a council policy that we use at Planning Commission, council is supposed to use it as well, where if you gather any information like, developer so-and-so called me about this project, and it's before it now, you are to disclose that at the task force meeting. So prior to your vote, disclose what the conversation is or what the information is that you received so that everybody can hear it. And that is part of the council policy. And the council policy also has a policy that is also no appearances of bias. State law is no bias, but we have no appearance of bias. So the more that we speak to others about it and express an opinion before something comes to a vote before the task force or any commission, you may be actually giving an appearance of bias, where you're not hearing all the sides at a meeting who want to talk about this and influence you at the meeting to vote one way or the other. You're not hearing all the facts, you're not hearing all the opinions. So I would also caution you about expressing, you know, a hard and fast opinion about something that is coming before you.
Now, if I could follow up on that, we've had, Teresa and I have had a discussion with planning staff. How can we make these meetings good for you and good for the public? Because it's a challenge. I mean, there's over 40 people here.
Right.
And we want to encourage discussion here. We want to maximize that, but there's going to be limits to that, obviously, right? So a normal part of meetings as well is asking questions. And to the extent, and these were good questions, Leslie, I don't want to suggest anything about that, and I'm glad you asked them. But if there are questions relating to things in the packet, and we're spending a lot of time in our meetings just trying to understand the staff reports, that's taking away time for discussion. And we want to make sure that people feel that there's a full opportunity for discussion here, so you don't have to feel like you have a need to do it somewhere else. So to that extent, we have talked with planning staff, and you're going to get these packets in the, you know, a week ahead of time. They're going to be online for the public as well. Please read them over. If you've got questions about anything that's in the packets, there's going to be a public forum in the planning staff to send an email, ask them the question that you have, the information, the answer will be posted publicly. Know that. And so that way we can maximize the time that we do here have for discussions and not trying to understand the reports. That's not to say you're going to be precluded from asking questions, okay? But really try to take advantage of that and keep the discussion and expression of opinions, as our attorney has advised us, try to keep that to here.
You know, Chair Pandori, thank you. I really appreciate you bringing that up, because the other thing also that I know I hate and staff hates is I don't like surprises at the meeting and last-minute questions where I need time to really look at what your issue is. And I know staff gives far more complete answers when they have your questions ahead of time, and they will just say, commissioners had these questions and these are the responses, and they've been able to actually prepare a complete response for you that they can research if they need to, et cetera. And I feel the same way, so I really encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Okay. And Pat, I'll get to you just momentarily, but staff, what's the email address that we're going to use for whether it's the public or task force members sending questions?
It's generalplanstaff@sanjoseca.gov, and you can put the subject line for your task force or for a year review. Appreciate it.
All right. Pat? General plan staff, all one word, @sanjoseca.gov.
Question, you say we would get our materials a week in advance. By a week, is that 7 business days in advance or 7 calendar days, which means only 5 business days in advance?
It's calendar days. So, for example, we send this packet out on a Wednesday. the Wednesday before this Wednesday meeting. So I think the next meeting is on, I think it's on Thursday, so we send out the Thursday before.
All right. So that email address works for the public as well. If you have questions, you can email your questions to the staff. Please try to do that ahead of the meeting so they can have the time to answer the questions. Okay, any other questions here before Michael?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
No.
Wait.
You're not kidding, are you?
No, I didn't hear what you're saying. Vera was
Okay.
asking me a question.
I was just asking if there's any questions.
Oh, that's the question. I don't have any questions.
All right. All right.
All right, so I'm going to quickly go over what the general plan is. That's why we're here, is the Envision San Jose General Plan. So really, the general plan is the city's overarching official policy statement regarding the future character of the city, its land use patterns and quality of development. It's been called the Constitution for a city, a blueprint for the future of the city. And what it does is it identifies a vision of what the city would wants to become. In this case, it's the year 2040, and then develops strategies, goals, and policies that are intended for us to get there, to achieve that vision. And this is a very broad document. There's elements that a general plan has to include. Ours is very, very broad. It includes goals and policies related to equity, goals and policies related to arts and culture. And it, of course, includes things regarding police and fire service times. And, of course, one of the main things that people think about in the general plan is land use, growth, development, and all that good stuff. And that's definitely in there. But it's a document that informs the decision makers on their decisions. So when a council's making a decision about service levels or new parks or a development proposal, a whole gamut of things, the staff make a recommendation based on whether the decision or the recommendation or the project or whatever it is consistent with the goals and policies of the general plan. And so our recommendation is based on that. And then council will make findings based on consistency with the general plan. So it's really a very pragmatic, practical document that we use on a weekly basis. So I kind of touched upon this already, but this general plan does include a vision. There's an image of that in just a second. It includes its major strategies, which I'll go over. It includes standards for city services. So I did talk about there's services, there's standards for parks, provision of parks, police service times, fire times, that sort of thing. There used to be what was called level of service for traffic or traffic congestion or delay. That's actually no longer a standard. And then, of course, the thing that a lot of us really look towards is what's called the land use transportation diagram, which is that map that has all the colors on it, that says what can someone do with their land if they want to redevelop. So just kind of history of planning in like super fast in a 5-minute elevator ride, is that San Jose really didn't grow very much up until about 1955. So we were part of the Valley of Heart's Delight. This is actually a chart. You can see the population and land area from 1925 to present. And it was just, through World War II, it was kind of stayed the Valley of Heart's Delight. And then what happened was after World War II, of course, was the post-war boom. High-tech, IBM located here in 1956, actually before in the 40s, but really expanded in the mid-50s. And that's the era of really San Jose sprawling, when the city had Dutch Hammond as its city manager, whose vision was to create the the Los Angeles of Northern California. And most of San Jose's urban or suburban or physical legacy comes from that Dutch Hammond period. Then starting in the early 70s, there was really a backlash towards that. I think a lot of it had to do with the city was subsidizing development and didn't have enough resources to provide a lot of the services, and we were just growing outward, and there was sort of a questioning of that, and sort of maybe we should talk about managing growth, actually. And so that was the period when General Plan 75, the first modern general plan, was enacted by the City Council. That was the beginning of what we have today as the VTA's light rail network, and really kind of the focus is starting to grow inward, and growing, not just growing, but bringing back our downtown. So one of the big changes that's happened is that the land area of San Jose, we really have stopped growing in terms of land area, but our population, of course, continues to grow, and we're essentially going from growing out to growing up, and that's what that chart shows. So I think some of you, of course, about a third or half of you remember this, but we had the Envision San Jose task force process and a community engagement process. The overall update process started in August of 2007, and it took 5 years. It wasn't done until November 1st of 2011 when the council approved the new general plan. We had a 35-member task force back then. We've grown a bit. This general plan really builds upon the previous general plan, but it is a new general plan. I should add that we had 5,000 people, independent people, not people participating more than once, but 5,000 discrete people participated in this urban village plan. And just one thing I really remember is that staff was talking about concepts and ideas of what we could do, and the task force said to staff, you are being too timid. This is San Jose, we need to be more bold. And so that was kind of the message that we got. Prior to this general plan, the word urban was a little bit too scary, and we were advised not to use the word urban in public. So kind of coming from so it's a very, very bold general plan, and that boldness came from the task force and the community members that were involved in creating it. So I won't go over this in detail, but you can see there are, I think, 7 or 8 key vision concepts: innovative economy, environmental leaderships, diversity, social equity, healthy neighborhoods, quality education and services, vibrant arts and culture, and interconnected city. And this is sort of the kind of encapsulate the future of what we want to become, which is San Jose embodies the energy and vitality of its unique human, natural, and economic resources. And we have 12 major strategies where they're generally designed to further us to get to that vision. I'm not going to go through them all right here. I'm going to walk you through them very quickly individually. So I did talk about this, but community-based planning, I mean, this plan is about engaging the community and with the belief that when you get people involved and you get a diversity of stakeholders and a diversity of perspectives, the outcome is much better for it. And so again, we actually received an award for our community participation in the Envision San Jose process. And just the fact that we're having this task force today is really reflective of this community-based planning major strategy. So form-based planning. So this plan is really, the form really matters. So this plan articulates a vision for a vision of the future that's a more urban form, provides flexibility for economic development activity, and is really promoting cohesive and complete neighborhoods. This plan really, again, builds off previous plans going back to 1975. It's about focusing growth, not just focusing growth inward, but focusing growth into specific growth areas. This includes downtown, North San Jose, the new and old Edenvale kind of business areas, but also the urban villages and our older specific plans. And it's really a way, this general plan is about focusing the growth and then preserving the quality of our existing established neighborhoods that are outside of those growth areas. And of course, it's one of the motivations for doing that is to reduce environmental and fiscal impacts to the city. So Regional Innovation Employment Center is one of the key major strategies of this general plan. Plans for 470,000 new jobs. This is actually out of date, right? So it's 382,000 new jobs. I think this is from the previous task force, 4-year task force. And the goal is to achieve a 1.1 jobs to 1 employed resident. Actually, you're seeing the slide from 4 years ago. It reflects what it was before this task force recommended changing it. And the one thing about this Regional Employment Center is really about building more urban job centers and focusing them on transit. So it's trying to change the dynamic or the pattern of this valley where jobs are kind of spread all over the place in 1- and 2-story concrete tilt-up surrounded parking lots, and there's no transit in sight. There's nowhere to get to your job but driving a long distance. I'm going to move on. We've kind of touched enough on that. So I think really a new concept for this general plan is the concept of an urban village plan or urban villages. There are roughly about 64 of them spread throughout San Jose. And the idea of urban villages came about in part because the city has an urban growth boundary. We do not want to grow outside of that urban growth boundary. We don't have much underutilized land. We're not Chicago or Gary, Indiana. I'm not even going to compare us to Detroit. Our land is maybe low-intensity suburban, but it's very well used. And so there's a challenge of how we're going to accommodate new, especially population growth, without actually, kind of looking at opportunities for redevelopment. And so the strategy that came forward is an urban village strategy that looks at building mixed-use, what's called complete communities on our commercial corridors that are often very well served with transit, that would provide opportunities for people to do things in closer proximity, maybe live and work in close proximity, play, and would address a number of goals, including reducing greenhouse gases by providing opportunities for people to drive shorter distances and maybe walk, ride a bike, or take transit. And it's really also a strategy to build a city of great places. So I think we have great people in the city. We've been accused of not always having great places. So the idea of the strategy is to really build these really wonderful places that are almost like third spaces that communities can gather, meet their neighbors, and sort of have give an identity for the community in which they reside. So streets for people. So I think a big shift with this general plan, a major shift with this general plan was design San Jose streets for people, not cars. So this is really talking about transforming a city that was built under Dutch Ham in the 1950s, under 53 Buick Specials, built for the car, and to really reinvent that to a city that works not just for motor vehicles, but also for transit, bicycles, and pedestrians. And that's really, really, I think, a major shift. It's not, we've been working on it for a while, but really sort of acknowledging and embracing that. And designing streets to serve more than automobiles is really one of the key major new bold steps we're taking with this general plan. So measure sustainability. We did have the Green Vision that Chuck Reed had, that a lot of those Green Vision goals are incorporated in here. The big new thing that we've done is we created a climate action plan. It's called Climate Smart San Jose. And so what this general plan is really, the larger goal is, of course, is to reduce greenhouse gases and our contribution through climate change. And a big part of that is, of course, of how we plan the city in terms of the land use fabric that we achieve. A fiscally sustainable city is another major strategy. You have to remember that this general plan was prepared during the Great Recession. The issue of the sustainability of the city was a paramount issue, and it continues to be an issue even to this day. And so this plan really strives to deliver services efficiently, cultivate financial resources, and preserve our employment lands for a number of reasons. In this case, also because employment lands generally are more fiscally positive than residential lands. So destination downtown is another major strategy of this general plan, and this has been a strategy in the general plan for many, many years. You could say that we've been planning for destination downtown really with the redevelopment agency coming back in the 70s. But the idea is to build downtown San Jose as not just a vibrant job center and not just a housing center, a place where people can live, but also to be the cultural heart of Silicon Valley. So it plans for a lot of growth. And really is intended to build upon the great transit access here, which with BART coming in 10 to 15 years and high-speed rail at some point, we're going to have some of the best access west of the Mississippi for our downtown. And so San Jose has great weather, probably the best weather in the world, more so than Redwood City, I'd even say. And we have these incredible natural resources, including the Guadalupe Park, Coyote Creek. And the idea is these are things that we need to enhance and build upon and embrace. So the general plan talks about building out our world-class trail network, strengthening our city's green belt, and continue to add parks and other amenities. And the other thing that the major strategy is designed for a healthy community, and that is, of course, ensuring that all communities have access to healthy foods, and creating an environment that's healthy in terms of air quality and water. But it's also really about our land use fabric. And I think this was an aha moment for staff and the task force some 8 or 9, 10 years ago, when we really became aware that the land use, the urban environment we have affects people's health. In an environment where you have to drive your car everywhere in long distance, you're more likely to have higher incidence of diabetes, heart disease, depression, So it affects people's health significantly. And so trying to create a city that encourages an active lifestyle, that allows people to maybe bike, walk, to take care of some of their daily needs. We all aspire to go to the gym regularly, and if we're lucky, we get there maybe one day a week. If you could take care of your daily needs by just, without even thinking I am exercising, that would be an admirable achievement. So the other major strategy in this general plan is about plan horizons and periodic major review. I'll start with the periodic major review. That's us today. Here we are. So the prior general plan did not have this 4-year review process. I'm not aware of any other cities in California having a 4-year review process. One of the things that happened with the prior general plan 2020 is people started to feel that it became a general plan of exceptions, that every Tuesday there was something being considered to change the general plan. It's not every Tuesday, but it's 4 times a year. And that it was getting really, really out of date. And there needed to be this point where people got together, in this case we recommend a task force, that got together and said, let's look at this plan. How are we doing? Are we headed towards our vision? Are we headed towards our goals? Do we need to do some course corrections? It's kind of a self-evaluation of how we're doing. And so that's what we're actually undertaking starting tonight. And we think it's a really, it's a great process to build in to sort of keep the general plan relevant and adapt to changing circumstances. So the other one is horizons. And this urban village, this general plan plans for 120,000 housing units. But the task force and the council had some concerns about letting all of that housing growth capacity be available at the approval of the general plan. So they created these horizons, and these horizons are only for residential development. They're only for urban villages. And the idea behind this was because the city wanted to grow in a balanced manner. So as housing went up, employment went up, and so they grew in imbalance. And if you remember, we'll talk about this in a minute, how San Jose is actually an imbalanced city the other way, which is we're kind of the black sheep of Silicon Valley. The other idea is that we need to make sure that we had the resources to provide services to all those housing units, so it was a way of managing that growth over time. So there's the Horizon 1 urban villages, and this has changed, by the way. I'm sorry, this is not completely up to date, but it gives you the general idea. But the urban villages of Horizon 1 are those that are radiated out of downtown on major transit corridors, and those are the urban village plans that were intended to have housing development move forward first. And then there's the Horizon 2 urban villages, which are the urban villages located along the light rail lines in San Jose. And Jared's going to talk about this in a minute. Many of them have actually been moved up to Horizon 1, including the Berryessa BART urban village, which you all recommended last time. And then the third set of urban villages are really those outlying urban villages that are could be on some good transit, but are really, they're not on light rail, they're not on downtown, they're kind of really more out in the suburban parts of San Jose. So I'll quickly go over the 4-year review process. So one of the things, and Jared's going to get into this more, but one of the things we do is we assess how are we doing with our economic goals, how are we achieving our jobs to employed resident ratio, are we becoming a more balanced city, or are we still unbalanced? We look at our urban village policies, how we're doing to achieve that strategy. We evaluate environmental indicators, including our greenhouse gas emissions, and we evaluate our housing capacity in terms of do we have the right policy framework and goals and capacity to achieve our needed housing. This task force can make a recommendation based on its analysis of the things above that I just covered in terms of, are we ready? Should we open up a new horizon? Should we move Horizon 2 into 1 or 3 up, or whatever that looks like? Or could recommend moving up individual villages, as was done last time. And again, this is an opportunity to consider mid-course adjustments to implementing this general plan. Just going to take a breath for a second. Okay, so Now onto the scope of the scope of this 4-year review. And this was in a memo that I believe should be in your packet. If it's not, is it in the? It's in your packet. That comes from a memo that was written by Mayor Sam Liccardo and approved by the City Council. So the first batch of scope items relates to urban village implementation, and we're going to be getting into this tonight. So this is not all background night. We're actually going to be rolling up our sleeves and getting into some issues. And we'll be looking at redistributing some of the planned growth and within villages, modifying some urban village boundaries, looking at eliminating some urban villages. We're going to be looking at modifying policies related to related to housing and mixed-use developments within urban villages. We're going to be talking about urban village growth horizons, where it might make sense to make some adjustments. We'll be talking about the residential pool. Should we replenish that or not? And we'll get into the wonky details of that momentarily. It's not about swimming pools. It's about capacity for housing growth. And we'll be talking about some modifying some general plan policies to further implement and facilitate the development of urban villages. The next scoping item is opportunity housing. So this general plan, and I kind of covered this before, was really about leaving the existing single-family neighborhoods alone and focusing growth into higher density corridors. And one of the scoping items is really to explore, could you allow some middle density in existing single-family neighborhoods? For example, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, in limited areas in the city that are already areas adjacent to higher density areas or areas that are adjacent to urban villages that are along robust transit lines. So that's something we're going to be looking at. As you may be, if you've been following what's going on to the state, Senator Scott Wiener's had various bills getting at this, but San Jose is actually getting out ahead of that and sort of developing what we think will work for our city proactively. We'll also be looking at residential uses and underutilized business corridors. So a number of our neighborhood business districts are not urban villages. Lincoln Avenue, not an urban village. Willow Street, not an urban village. Story Road, and I'm forgetting the other one that comes to mind. What's it? 13th Street in my neighborhood. So could there be opportunities to allow for the introduction of residential development within those neighborhood business districts? The other scoping item related to housing is commercial space requirements for affordable developments. We've heard that affordable developments have a lot of challenges of providing commercial space, a lot having to do with how those are financed. So we'll be exploring some changes to commercial space requirements for affordable housing, where there are requirements. There are not always requirements. And I think one of the big ones I think a lot of people are very excited about and are probably eager to talk about is Coyote Valley. So there's a long history to Coyote Valley, but we're kind of looking at a significant turn here in terms of the city's vision and future of Coyote Valley. So Measure T was passed by the voters that put a bond for $15 million, which would go to buy a significant, if not a very large portion of North Coyote from the two major property owners, and that's an area that's been planned for industrial growth for many, many years. So we'll be talking about that as well as the future of the Mid-Coyote Urban Reserve. And then we'll be talking about shifting some capacities around, residential capacities, a little bit of commercial capacity, particularly with the focus of downtown. There's actually a need, given all the development interest going on right now with downtown, to actually add capacity to downtown. And then two more. So vehicle miles traveled. We're going to be recommending going to what's called Tier 2 policies to reduce vehicle miles traveled. One of the reasons, we'll get into that later, but it's really the larger approach is looking at ways we can further implement our climate smart San Jose and encourage reduced vehicle miles traveled and lower greenhouse gas emissions. Another item we will be exploring with this task force is really looking at potentially reworking or closing the Evergreen East Hills development policy, which has been around, I think, since the mid-'80s or even has roots back into the '70s. And there's a reason for this. I'll leave it at that, but that's sort of a big question about whether we retire that policy, and we'll be getting into that. And with that, that includes my presentation.
So we're a little bit behind on our schedule. We're going to finish at 9 o'clock, okay? I know there's a lot of just sitting here and listening. We want the meetings to be active with lots of participation, but this meeting's going to be different than the others because we need to get everybody to the same base of information, as well as what's happened since the last 4 years. So we're going to be sitting here listening a bit more before we get to the first issue that was part of the council direction, which was urban villages. To stay on time, I'm going to turn it over to Rosalind, who might suggest how we can stay on time with staff.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank staff for all of that background information. And we do want to make sure that everybody can come up to speed on our current general plan, on the scope that the City Council has approved and the work that the task force is going to embark. What I am going to suggest, the next item is the 4-year review progress report. Now, the progress report is included in your packet. This item is actually going to City Council, Jared, on December 10th, 3rd.
I'd say there's a similar item. Our general plan annual review progress report is going to council on December 3rd.
December 3rd
Right,
meeting.
which will have
So there
similar
will be a similar presentation from staff, basically giving an overview of where we are in terms of meeting our objectives and goal of the general plan. I'm going to suggest, given the tight time frame, and that I think it's important that we get right into staff recommendations on urban villages. And so I'm going to suggest that perhaps we skip this particular portion, agenda item 4. If there's specific questions that any of the task force members have on the progress report, we're happy to take those. But I think we can make better use of our time if we go straight into the staff recommendations and then really get to a discussion among the task force members around those recommendations.
Michelle.
Mr.
Michelle Yesney.
Mr. and Ms. Chair, thank you. I want to suggest a working change. This loudspeaker system, this communication system, is not very good if you move away and then you move back. Rosalind was speaking very clearly and consistently into the microphone. If you do that, everybody can hear what you say. But there's a tendency for people, especially who are reading, to look down at their table and then look back up. And as they finish a thought, they draw away from the microphone. For this particular system, everybody's going to have to talk into the microphone, hopefully in a consistent voice, maybe not quite that close. But so not all of us are young and have great hearing. And it would be really nice if everyone could use the microphone in a consistent fashion. That was all I had.
Harvey?
I reviewed this, I actually did my homework, and what struck me, and I want to make sure I read it correctly, we're still at 0.82 jobs per employed resident.
So that's a question. So why don't we let the staff do the presentation on the progress report, and then we'll.
No, she was going to skip.
No. Rosalind just said we're skipping that.
All right. All right, let's do this. I'm going to exercise a little bit of prerogative. I think it is important for us to be brought up to speed with what's happened in the last 4 years, because there's been a lot of changes, and I know this council has been very concerned about the challenges that the city's facing right now. I think for many of us who participated in this process back when Mayor Reed appointed us, the times were entirely different. We were coming off the Great Recession. There were great concerns about developing a plan that was fiscally responsible for the city. And here we are now, not too far since then, and the city is facing a completely different set of challenges. So I think to that extent, it is really important to get a full report on the progress over the last 4 years, since it's really going to be a basis for the discussions we're going to have on urban villages and all the scope of work that the council gave us. So I know Rosalind was trying to maybe make this an opportunity for all of us to participate, but let's get that information. And then Harvey, hopefully that'll answer your questions, yes. So Jared? You're back.
Go fast. You're back.
Thank you, Dave. I will try to make this succinct. All right.
Speak into the mic.
Okay, let's see.
Raise your hand if you can't hear.
Yeah, let me know if you can't hear me. Okay, so this preservation, it's based off the report, the background report that is in your packet. This is just going to include some of the highlights, kind of looking at development trends, urban villages, economic development goals, and other kind of key goals that we're directed to look at as part of the 4-year review. So before we dive into looking at development trends, we want to first take a look at where we are in terms of our population growth over the last 8 years. So as of January 2019, San Jose had approximately 1,043,000 residents. That's an 8% increase from 2011. I would mention that population growth has slowed over the past 2 years. And that's largely due to declines in birth rates and migration of residents out of San Jose. And then actually, in fact, in 2018, the population growth in San Jose was basically unmeasurable, so we barely grew.
80 people in 1 year.
Right.
Growth.
In terms of the economy, regional economy, the country right now, we're in kind of the longest economic expansion since World War II. And the Bay Area has, as I think many people know, has outpaced both the nation and state and job growth. Most of that growth in the Bay Area is largely going to the sub-regions, particularly Silicon Valley and San Francisco. One thing I just note here on this slide, kind of this is an issue regionally. It's that San Jose, that middle-income jobs have been trending down, while high-skilled jobs are trending upward. This is a particular challenge to San Jose because only approximately 40% of our workers have a 4-year college degree. So diving into development trends. Or development activity, that is. So since adoption of the general plan, we've had approximately 8.6 million square feet of new commercial and industrial and office space has been built since 2011. Of that new space, 57% of new commercial space was constructed in the general plan's growth areas that Michael talked about in the previous presentation, and 86% of industrial and office space was located in our growth areas. This chart here, this shows kind of over time from fiscal year 11-12 to 18-19, the construction for commercial and industrial that was built over that time frame. You can see that fiscal year 17-18 represented the strongest year, basically actually over the last decade for commercial and industrial development. Moving on to residential. Since November of 2011, building permits have been issued for 23,800 units, which is an average of approximately 3,000 units per year. Of those, 94% are multifamily units, and 85% are within designated growth areas. So I think that kind of speaks to the success of the implementation of that particular major strategy. This is similar to the other graph, but showing building permits issued for new residential units from fiscal year 11-12 through 18-19. 13-14 was a particularly strong year, represented a 15-year high. Over 4,500 units were issued building permits during that fiscal year, which was kind of largely aided by entitlements prior to the Great Recession, and then entitlements coming out of that, and those projects going to construction. So moving into housing, and so as part of the 4-year review, the general plan requires the city to evaluate achievement of the general plan's affordable housing goals and availability of housing over the next 4-year cycle. So to this end, the city's housing element, required as part of the general plan by state law, was certified in April of 2015. The housing element plans for the city's fair share of the housing assigned by the state, which is based upon population projections and regional forecasts. Then subsequently, the Association of Bay Area Governments assigns the region's housing allocation to each jurisdiction, known as the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. The current RHNA cycles from 2014 to 2023. San Jose has been assigned about just around 35,000 units of the approximately 188,000 units assigned to the Bay Area region itself. So that equates to 18.5% of the growth that the city has been assigned for residential. So during the current RHNA cycle, the city, we've issued building permits for over 14,000 units, but only 19% of those have been affordable. The RHNA allocations are broken down by both market rate and affordable. We're assigned 60% of those units that were assigned are for affordable, and 40% are for market rate. So we're doing pretty well on our market rate. We're going to reach that target, but it's the affordable where we're struggling, and pretty much every city in the state is struggling on, with the exception of a few small cities. Beverly Hills is, I think, the one city meeting their RHNA allocation. So one of the primary challenges in San Jose, and of course across the Bay Area, is the match between our residents' incomes and the cost of housing. Over 60% of jobs in San Jose are in the mid and low wage category. But as this graph shows, most housing in the city is unaffordable to workers in those jobs, where the average monthly rent for Class C or B one-bedroom apartment ranges from around $1,900 to $2,400 a month. Some of the challenges in terms of housing, I mean, I think none of these are surprises. We've had the dissolution of the redevelopment agency that previously provided $40 million a year towards affordable housing, and then two other, particular challenges that both market rate and affordable are facing is just the high cost of land in this valley, and then extremely high construction costs. Some of the strategies, there's been some funding that has come forward, County Measure A, and coming out of the state, we have SB2 and Proposition 1. So some of that money will go towards affordable housing, as well as planning as well. There's some planning grant money there, particularly with SB2. In terms of on the local front, the city council established a citywide goal of 25,000 homes, at least 10,000 of those affordable, be constructed or approved by 2022, which then led to the Housing Crisis Work Plan. And that work plan prioritized policy actions to facilitate the development of housing, as being led by Office of Economic Development, Planning, and Housing staff. Other noteworthy policy work, out of a lot of policy work going on, particularly with our with the housing department, but updates to our city's inclusionary housing ordinance, and then also we've done multiple code amendments that have significantly eased restrictions on accessory dwelling units. And so we've seen a really big uptick on permitting for ADUs. So urban villages, this is the topic of the night. So one of the key topics, we'll be discussing tonight. And So thus far, there's been 12 urban village plans that have been adopted by council, and 2 are currently in the planning process. That's Berryessa-Bart Urban Village and the North First Street Urban Village. And then there's 3 additional plans that are going to be initiated next year in 2020. All urban village plans have and will continue to involve extensive community input when developing those plans. Looking at our development activity thus far in urban villages, so over 9,500 units and 3.5 million square feet of non-residential uses have received planning permit approvals since November 2011. And then there's also a general plan policy that allows what's known as a signature project, which lets mixed-use residential projects move forward ahead of a planning horizon or an adopted urban village if it meets certain criteria, and then clearly advances the implementation of the urban village major strategy. So this connects with the kind of the horizon strategy that Michael was alluding to in the previous presentation, and this is a subject we will be discussing tonight in terms of some proposed updates by staff. So currently, 6 signature projects have been approved by the City Council, and 1's in the pipeline. And of those 6, 2 of those projects are currently under construction. The 2 are the Sparta, located on 11th and Santa Clara Street, and then the Orchard, which is Capitol along Capitol and McKee. So moving along to economic development goals. As Michael explained earlier, the general plan's regional employment center major strategy, it aims to transform San Jose from a bedroom community into an employment center. The general plan plans for 382,000 new jobs, and it sets a goal to really reverse the imbalance of jobs to housing by establishing the jobs to employed resident ratio of 1.1 by 2040 and 1.0 by 2025. As mentioned earlier in my presentation, the city's added 80,000 new jobs since 2011, which is a 21% increase. But based on the most current data, the city's jobs employed resident ratio has been relatively stagnant. It's at 0.82 currently. And really, what those numbers show is that we've been adding more employed residents than jobs since adoption of the general plan, which has contributed to the jobs to employed resident ratio moving downward. There is some other factors that goes into that, as well as that the unemployment rate is so low that also kind of factors in to when this particular number is calculated. The city would need to average approximately 13,000 new jobs per year to achieve the total planned jobs in the general plan. We're averaging around by 10,000 or so a year. So the graph on the slide here shows the city's projected job growth out to 2040 and the actual trajectory of our job growth going forward if we were kind of to stay at the same pace. Some of this, to kind of shorten the presentation here, I'm going to skip this. Most of this is kind of just some basic information on where we are with the budget. One thing I think I want to just point out on this slide is Measure T, which was approved by voters in 2018, and that, of course, is connected to the Coyote Valley scoping item on the 4-year review, and that bond measure allowed the city to partner with the Open Space Authority to acquire property in Coyote Valley for preservation, and then obviously kind of changing really a big change in planning context in the general plan around land use in Coyote Valley. So that's an item that we'll be talking about during this 4-year review.
Well, I think you should just note that there's a projected surplus in the city's budget of $5.1 million, whereas previous years the projections have generally all been a shortfall. So that's kind of, we're in the hottest economy in the planet, and our budget is starting to reflect that a little bit.
Right, and actually would be, so in that 5.1 surplus, projected surplus is for this fiscal year. Over the next 4 years, there's a projected shortfall between 1.7 million and 5.6 million in 3 of those 4 years. So 3 years projected shortfall, 1 year there's a projected surplus.
So we should spend money next year.
I'd also mention there's almost a 54% increase in capital improvement spending, and I think that's largely due to Measure T and that money that's now available for kind of critical infrastructure needs. So I think that's a positive in terms of the city's CIP program, at least in the short term. So moving on to environmental goals, just some quick key highlights here that the City Council adopted Climate Smart in 2018. This Climate Smart uses the general plan itself as a foundation, and then it goes further to create a pathway for the city to achieve the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. I'd also note that the Environmental Services Department also recently completed an updated greenhouse gas emissions inventory for San Jose. Some of you may recall, who were on the task force last time, there was a greenhouse gas inventory prepared last time around with a baseline year of 2014. So the results of the most recent inventory show that between 2014 and 2017, the city's greenhouse gas emissions have decreased by 17%. So this is mostly tied to, or mostly due to PG&E's cleaner electricity grid and an overall reduction in energy consumption in the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors. So last but not least, healthful community goals. So this is a major component of the general plan's healthful community goals is getting people out of their cars and giving residents more and safer options to travel. Some capital investments and programs being implemented include, of course, the BART extension. The various BART station is anticipated to open for business in 2020. And then with BART Phase 2 on the way, we've seen expansion of bike share. There's about 72 stations now around the city, and then the new micro mobility options, which particularly is around scooters, which weren't around. I think the last 4-year review, city has approximately 4,400 e-scooters out there around the city. In terms of access to healthful foods and those goals, the city currently has 11 weekly farmers markets and 19 active community gardens. In 2016, the City Council approved the Urban Agriculture Incentive Zone Ordinance, and that allows qualified parcels between 0.1 and 1 acre to apply for a contract with the city to develop and maintain urban activities on that parcel. And then in return, the county assessor can reduce the assessed value of the property to the value of irrigated cropland, which ends up being a huge savings for the property owner. And that concludes Steph's presentation.
So thank you very much. We're going to shift over into the Urban Village presentation shortly, but let's do this just so we make sure it gets done. Everybody got the form in their binder for the City of San Jose Volunteer Code of Ethics. If you haven't filled that out, fill it out now. We're going to take like a 2-minute stretch break, and then we'll start up with Urban Villages. Once you fill it out, just pass it down this way, and we'll collect them all.
So this is irrelevant?
Yeah, there's a supervisor line. Unless you think somebody's supervising you, don't fill that out. So.
We need lots of supervisors.
I just always say the first time I see you, I say, I never actually say that.
We'll figure it out.
No, I don't know, because I was going to put seats. Who do I see? Oh, about coffee. Yeah, you can like we can. Okay, we're going to get started now. So please take your seats. Eddie Trong, Jason Sue, Leslie Corsilia, Pam Foley. Who's doing the Urban Villages presentation? Are you doing the presentation? Okay, good. She's ready.
Okay, we are starting back up. If everybody could settle down. Jim Zito? Jim. Thank you. All right. Jessica, you're going to take us away on the Urban Village recommendations. Let me clarify one thing first on this. This is our this is one of our first topics that we're going to take on right now that the council sent to us is urban villages. There's going to be a staff presentation. After that, we're going to open it up for discussion. We're not taking any action tonight. After the discussion, there's a public comment period. Public comment can pertain to urban villages as well as anything that's been the subject of the meeting tonight. Please keep in mind that the comments need to be confined to the scope of work that the council gave us. So the plan is we'll have the presentation, we'll have discussion at the beginning of the next meeting. We're going to vote or take consensus action on the urban villages. And the reason for that is we want to take into account public comment that we have tonight on that topic. So Jessica, go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening, task force members. My name is Jessica Satyawan, and today I'll be presenting our staff recommendations on our urban village policy changes. Please note that all these staff recommendations are outlined in the memo in your binder. So if you miss anything or you leave today and you need to refer back to it, please refer to the memo. It's all listed in there. So based on the City Council's approved scope of work approved earlier this year, we analyzed 5 topics pertaining to urban villages. The first is redistribution of planned growth and urban village boundary modifications. The second, urban village growth horizons. The third, residential pool units. The fourth, general plan policy IP 5.5. And then the last but not least, making changes to general plan policy IP 5.10, which is a signature project policy. You may notice that the mixed income within mixed use affordable development scope item is not listed. This topic will instead be part of our December task force meeting as part of the housing discussion. The first urban village scope item directed staff to analyze limited redistribution of planned jobs and housing growth within urban villages based on market demand and other changes in planning context. And so we came up with 3 recommendations: removing the Evergreen Village urban village, removing the East Capitol Foxdale Drive urban village, and then modifying the boundary of the Ray Street Light Rail urban village. As part of eliminating some of these urban villages, we're recommending redistributing planned housing and jobs capacity to various other growth areas in the city. However, we will discuss that as part of the February task force meeting, where we'll be discussing capacity shifts to downtown and to other areas of the city. Our first recommendation is to eliminate the Evergreen Village. It is a 49-acre Horizon 1 neighborhood village, as shown by the red dash line on the map on this slide. The village is already almost entirely built out with single-family homes, townhomes, a thriving and recently updated shopping center, and a highly used public plaza. There are 2 remaining opportunity sites totaling 1.3 acres, but because the urban village is already established with active and fairly recent development and has limited opportunities for growth, an urban village planning effort would not be fruitful. Staff also recommends eliminating the East Capitol / Foxdale Drive urban village, which is a Horizon 3 neighborhood village spanning 14 acres. Approximately 95% of the village is already occupied by the Foxdale Village Apartments, which are a deed-restricted affordable housing project that provides 114 rental housing units for low-income families. Due to the village's small size and existing uses, redevelopment of the village is highly unlikely and not recommended, as it would displace existing low-income families from rent-restricted affordable housing. Another change that staff recommends is the modification of the Race Street Light Rail Urban Village. This urban village is a Horizon 1 local transit village, and it has two parts. The area called west of Sunol is indicated on the map in the red outline. And Reed and Graham, the Reed and Graham site is indicated with the red hash polygon on the map. Reed and Graham is one of two remaining asphalt and recycled aggregates corporations remaining in the South Bay. And it provides asphalt for public capital improvement and roadway maintenance projects, as well as for private development. Given its location adjacent to elevated Interstate 280, the long-standing industrial use of this property, as well as the industrial uses on adjacent properties, urban village type uses would be unsuitable for the site, including residential development are not suitable. Additionally, the area east of Lincoln Avenue and west of Reed and Graham, denoted by the black hash polygon on the map, are existing industrial sites on land designated as combined commercial industrial and would not be locations that would be suitable for urban village type uses either, especially since now that we recommend to keep Reed and Graham. So staff are therefore proposing to modify the Race Street Light Rail Urban Village boundary to remove both the Reed and Graham site and areas east of Lincoln Avenue from the village. A potential new urban village may be considered in a later task force meeting. Caltrain is anticipated to have increased service to its capital Caltrain station as part of Caltrain's long-term vision plan, making this area a strategic node for mixed-use development. The Monterey Corridor Working Group is a working group of Monterey Corridor stakeholders, and they're considering adding a new Horizon 1 urban village on the east side of Monterey Road, adjacent to the capital Caltrain station, as indicated in the blue on the map on this slide. This area is already planned for employment growth as part of the West Capitol Expressway and Monterey Road Employment Lands growth area, so adding residential capacity would allow mixed-use development adjacent to a current regional transit station. The Monterey Corridor Working Group will meet in January 2020 and make an official recommendation to staff, and depending on the recommendation, we might bring it back to you guys in February. The second urban village scope item directed staff to evaluate the city's jobs and housing balance, fiscal sustainability, housing supply, and infrastructure to determine whether to move urban villages that are in a future horizon into the current plan horizon as part of the 4-year review and outlined in General Plan Policy IP 2.5. So currently, the jobs to employed residents ratio is 0.82, which is slightly higher than the Envision 2040 General Plan. When it was adopted, we had a jobs to employed residents ratio of 0.8. Demand for city services has increased since 2011, as reflected by an increased population and an increased adopted operating budget each year. The city continues to provide services and infrastructure to meet the current needs and anticipate future needs from potential population growth. Furthermore, the current Horizon 1 urban villages and other base growth areas contain adequate capacity to meet the regional housing needs allocation of 35,080 units. Additionally, council just approved shifting a total of 8 urban villages as recently as December 2018 as part of the general plan annual review. As part of the housing crisis work plan, council directed staff to move key Horizon 2 urban villages located along existing fixed rail or BRT into Horizon 1 to accelerate residential development. So it's the first 4 listed on the slide. City Council also directed staff to move West San Jose urban villages such as Winchester, Santana Row, Valley Fair, Stevens Creek, and South Bascom North urban villages from Horizon 3 to Horizon 1 because that's where in San Jose where the market rate housing is most likely to break ground in the current market. So based on our analysis on policy IP 2.5 and the shifts last year, we do not recommend a wholesale move to Horizon 2. However, we do recommend shifting the 5 Wounds BART and the South 24th Street / William Court urban villages to Horizon 1. The Five Wounds BART Urban Village is one of 4 regional transit urban villages and is the only one that's not in Horizon 1. The South 24th Street / William Court Urban Village is located directly south of the Five Wounds BART Urban Village and adjacent to the future 28th Street and Little Portugal BART station. These 2 villages were not included in Horizon 1 during the adoption of the general plan because we were uncertain about the funding and the time frame of the Silicon Valley BART extension. However, now that BART Phase 2 is in the planning process, we want to move it to Horizon 1. The third urban village scope item directed staff to consider whether to reset the number of the units in the residential pool to 5,000 to allow entitlement of residential projects within urban village areas not included within the current plan horizon as part of General Plan Policy IP 2-11. The pool was originally established to limit residential growth in areas not within the current plan horizon. And so the general plan was intended to focus on promoting job growth to fix the jobs and housing imbalance in the city. But within the current regional housing crisis, the policy could be an additional and unnecessary hurdle to our need for more housing. Since the adoption of the general plan 2011, approximately 40% of the 5,000 unit residential pool was used, as indicated in that table on the slide. Full disclosure, we realized that William and 22nd Street townhomes, there may have been a boundary adjustment in an urban village, and so this table is listed in the progress report, and we'll make an edit because we, after looking at the data again, we found that this project is actually just outside of the boundary, so we'll be editing it. Additionally, part of the intent of this policy is to allow projects to move forward in villages with approved plans that are not in the current horizon. However, all urban villages with adopted plans, with the exception of Five Wounds and the 24th Street and William Court urban villages, which we are recommending to move to Horizon 1 as part of this general plan process, are already in Horizon 1. So we don't see a value in having this policy around. The fourth urban village scope item directed staff to modify General Plan Policy IP 5.5 to provide more flexibility in the urban village planning process for establishing the location, timing, and mix of residential and commercial development in the urban village plan area. The three objectives listed under this policy were added by the City Council in 2014 to strengthen the jobs first principle in the general plan. While it's consistent with the general plan goals and policies of employment, land preservation, and enhancement, it's resulted in barriers in land use planning during the development of the urban village plans for establishing location, timing, and mix of residential and commercial development. Especially since the current regional housing crisis is at the forefront of the city's current planning objectives, City recommends that this policy should be amended to its original structure at the adoption of general plan in 2011, which removes the three objectives that were added in 2014. The last urban village scope item directed staff to modify Signature Project Policy IP 5.10 to establish appropriate, clear, and more predictable minimum residential densities for signature projects, and also to establish more clarity on the amount of commercial that would be required for signature projects. So based on staff's experience with the signature project policy and feedback from applicants, we analyzed ways to modify the policy to establish more clear and predictable requirements for signature projects. Since the adoption of the general plan, the requirements given to signature projects can appear subjective and inconsistent, so we wanted to really change this policy to be more clear. The proposed modifications would provide clear, objective, and consistent standards for signature projects. It's important to remember that the signature project policy was not an original policy in the Envision 2040 general plan. Sure.
That's actually not correct. The signature project policy was a part of the original general plan. It just that I think there was sort of, the task force was talking about these horizons and having firm horizons and drawing a line in the sand, and then it was, well, wait a minute, we really need to have some flexibility so that really exemplary projects could go forward with regardless of the horizon. So I just want to make a clarification on
The policy, to allow flexibility for projects to move forward ahead of the approved plan if they're exceptional in supporting general plan goals, providing additional uses and amenities more than typical projects, and helping create complete villages. The policy was created as an incentive for cornerstone projects. As we go through these recommendations, keep in mind that the intent of urban villages is to create complete communities that have both jobs and housing. Staff analyze approved signature projects to determine the recommended values for the revised policy. So it's worth noting that almost all the approved signature projects would meet or exceed the requirements that we're recommending. For the site location requirement, staff does not recommend any changes. The policy would still require that a signature project be within an urban village, and 2, it would need to have an urban village, residential, or commercial general plan land use designation. That would stay the same. For site selection, staff is recommending a prominent location or a site within minimum size and frontage for viability of commercial uses. Projects located at intersections or with more frontage have better visibility and therefore a better chance at success. Signature projects are also intended to be a cornerstone project for an urban village area and shall be in a location where it's most visible to passersby. Staff recommends signature projects to be located on a site at the corner of an intersection or an interior parcel of at least 3 acres with a 150-foot frontage. We analyzed the criteria against the city's parcels and concluded that at least one parcel is available for a signature project within each urban village. So for context, this project is located on 785 to 807 the Alameda, and this shows the total frontage of this project is 206, and I wanted to show you the 150-foot section, like how big it is relative to an existing project. So
This is the project next to Whole Foods. It has the Ace Hardware on the Alameda.
yeah, in this example, the 150-foot frontage would be approximately 3 storefronts. And our existing approved signature projects actually already meet this requirement. 6 of the 7 signature projects are located on a corner parcel, and only 1 is located on an interior parcel with a 200-foot frontage. So they already qualify under these recommended standards. Here's just another view with Google Street View for context. For the commercial requirement, staff recommends a certain percentage above fair share, depending on the urban village typology. A neighborhood village would need to provide 5% or more above its fair share of commercial. Local transit and commercial corridor villages would need to provide 10% more. And regional transit urban villages would need to provide 15% or more. We're also recommending an additional requirement based on the project site size. So for projects between 5 to 10 acres, they would be required to provide 5% more above their fair share in addition to the requirement based on the typology. Also, project sites larger than 10 acres would need to provide 10% or more. Staff analyzed the approved signature projects to determine the recommended requirements, and on average, the signature projects have provided approximately 40% above the urban village's fair share of commercial square footage. So all these projects would already pass with flying colors. Signature projects on larger sites tended to provide more above the village's average than those on smaller sites. And additionally, staff recommends more commercial square footage on larger sites because those sites can accommodate more when compared to less flexibility on smaller project sites. We actually looked at zoning, I believe, in San Diego, and this is where that came from.
If I could just add that too, I think the reason we're recommending this, there's a lot of unclarity and confusion in terms of developers when they are interested in doing a signature project, and we really thought it would be better to just provide a clear objective standard of what would be expected of a development as opposed to kind of a negotiated process or what the planner is feeling that day or the planning director or whatever. And it's just a matter of it's very clear, here's what what's expected, as opposed to having to go do a lot of back and forth with us to calculate what we think is the best number of staff for a given site.
Staff is also recommending a minimum residential density to meet the vision of the urban village typology. Neighborhood villages that are established within mostly residential neighborhoods are recommended to have a minimum of 30 dwelling units per acre. We use one of our signature projects, the Orchard, as the basis for this recommendation because the project was set in a mostly residential neighborhood and needed to be compatible with the surrounding single-family neighborhood. The local transit villages and commercial corridor and center villages have larger opportunity sites or provides opportunity to support local transit systems, and so they should have a higher density of 55 dwelling units per acre. This density is also the minimum requirement under the urban village land use designation in the general plan, so that's why we use the 55 dwelling units per acre. The regional transit urban villages have access to transit with regional significance and are recommended with the highest density at 75 dwelling units per acre, which is also the minimum residential density requirement established by VTA and BART. We also recommend minimum sizes for open space based on existing policies and based on the amount of open space provided by past signature projects. Policies in the West San Carlos, South Bascom, the Alameda, and East Santa Clara Street urban village plans have a required minimum size of 2,000 square foot for all publicly accessible open space, which we use as the recommended requirement for neighborhood village signature projects. Past signature projects have provided an average of approximately 47,000 square feet of publicly accessible open space, so that's just over an acre. Therefore, the staff recommended open space minimum sizes should be attainable by potential developers. For community outreach, staff recommends a minimum of 2 city-hosted project community meetings because this has been the standard for most signature projects. Non-signature projects only need 1, and we're requiring to go above and beyond. More public meetings are allowed and may lead to a project with more public acceptance, but a minimum of 2 meets the balance of staff resourcing while providing plenty opportunity for public input. And last but not least, staff is recommending streamlining the signature project design and approval process. Before, projects would need to go through PD zoning and permit process with 2 bodies of approval. However, we're recommending clarifying the design documents that the signature project has to comply with, and that they would move forward with a site or special use permit to 1 body of approval. That is still to be determined, but that is what we're thinking. And with that ends staff recommendations on urban village policies, and back to you.
Okay. I already see a number of signs up. There's a number of different recommendations here that deal with boundaries as well as signature projects and horizons. One of the thoughts we have in dealing with this in a logical manner is we could go through this recommendation by recommendation and focus discussion on that. So although I do see some signs up, let's start this way. So if you turn to your binder, and on page 7, one of the first recommendations is dealing with the urban village boundary modifications. Let's take that up first. And so if you have a comment or a question on that issue, go ahead and put your nameplate up, and we'll deal with that. And keep in mind, again, we're not going to be taking votes on this tonight. Perfectly free to express opinions, ask questions, but let's just do this topic by topic. So on that issue of the urban village boundary modifications, well, let's go with Shiloh. I think I see yours.
Can someone comment a little bit more about the Ray Street removal of the industrial use? And I mean, are they feeling, I mean, is their intent that they do want to be in this area for a long time? Or, I mean, yeah. I guess I wonder, given our housing needs and where this site is located, what is the best use of this site? And do we want to have this industrial use in the middle of our city?
All right, staff, do you want to address that? I think you had commented on the Reed and Graham site.
Yeah, so we really, staff collectively, Public Works, DOT really believe it's important to have these type of uses in the city. There are, as we said, there's only 2 of these facilities left in the South Bay. So it's important for the city to have competitive bids. It's important to have access to asphalt when you're doing construction projects, both public and private. Asphalt doesn't move very well over long distances. You have to keep it hot. So if you're bringing it down from Union City or Oakland, I don't know where they are, but they're outside of Santa Clara County, there's challenges of moving asphalt long distances. So this is part of that sort of core infrastructure that the city needs to function. Even housing development needs this stuff. And on top of that, we really have very, very limited land in the city for industrial uses, and this is an area that's kind of working. So we believe, and we're going to be talking more about this, like when we talk about Coyote, about removing jobs from Coyote and where industrial type jobs may locate in the city. So we think that this is an area that we are not recommending expanding and doing urban village type of environment over this area.
Carl, did you have your plate up, or is it, I'm sorry, Bonnie?
Yeah, so I represent District 8, so I have a question
Please
about.
bring the mic closer.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
Move it this way. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? So I represent District 8, so I have a question about the moving of the Evergreen Village boundary. So my question is how that affects, it says you can use the existing capacities, and obviously we're going to be talking about this when we talk about the EDP in February, so, obviously this is a whole other issue, but I was just wondering about the affordability component and how, that would be affected in terms of would there be any restrictions against putting anything there that would be affordable? Could there be any potential use for it, whatever?
No, this would not in any way affect whether affordable housing could be located in that village. So there are sites where housing can move forward now. There is one remaining site that, if someone wanted to, they would need to do a general plan amendment. But it's across from the library. There's like a little bit of land. They could potentially do housing there, which really gets into the conversation when we talk about the Evergreen Area Development Policy.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, Jim Zito?
Thank you. So I just want a clarification or confirmation that when a project gets removed from an urban village, what happens to its capacity or its ability to, its zoning overall?
So capacities will be moved. So we'll be talking about that later, but we'd be reallocating capacity. We would, is that, Jared, do you want to answer that one? Am I doing a good job? Okay, so, there is still capacity currently in the ADP if someone wanted to build out those sites. And there's actually an existing zoning for housing.
So we'll
there.
revert back
So
to
they
the-
could move, they can move forward. But 385 units is not feasible in this village unless you're going to build a 10-story tower. I don't know if people would be jumping up in arms for that. So would still be some very limited opportunities for some housing in this village. But most of the capacity we'll be talking about it later, but moving it out into somewhere else.
Would it revert back to the original zoning capacity that was there when it was first built?
It'd be dictated by the general plan and whatever ADP policy that comes out of this. So the Evergreen specific plan for which this is in has been retired. So it no longer exists as a policy document. It exists and it's been built, it's there. And so, yeah. Did I answer your question?
So it sounds like it'll be decided later on in this.
We'll talk about the capacities later.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael Van Avery?
Thank you, Chair. My issue is with the Ray Street elimination. So, as usual, Mr. Brio, I disagree with the recommendation to remove this out of this important area. We're trying to create connections with major arterials in the business districts. You're even, notating as future opportunities. I understand your rationale for the Reed and Graham opportunity, but you have a tow yard next to a beautiful Del Monte Park. You have the Midtown specific plan, and this is Lincoln Avenue. And so we're going to remain this substandard industrial use, which has very little commercial value, and sacrifice next to a transit station for the purposes of you telling us how to do the developer's business for asphalt. Additionally, I actually physically had this property, the Reed and Graham property, in a purchase and sale contract with Jerry Graham. I believe it had at one point residential designations. So again, this is a very short-sighted opportunity here. an example of how the urban villages are not working and why housing is not being built, because this kind of industrial property is a tow yard, is meaningless. Plus, we also have to keep our tax base as best as possible. We've invested millions of dollars in Midtown. My company specifically has invested millions of dollars in Midtown, and yet we're surrounded by this haphazard San Jose block-to-block industrial blight. Taking this property out continues that industrial blight. Let's go.
So if I could respond to that, the site east of Lincoln Avenue is actually designated commercial, combined industrial commercial, so it doesn't preclude non-industrial uses. It could be office building, there could be a new Zebrato center for nonprofits or things like that. So it doesn't preclude other higher intensity, cleaner type of uses. It's just basically not envisioning the area for urban village mixed use residential.
Okay, Vince Rocha?
Or is it, oh, Sean.
Sean.
Sorry.
Oh, Sean
Can't see
Milligan,
that
sorry.
I know I'm short, but I could stand up so you could see me, I guess. I am a longtime resident of Willow Glen, grew up in this area. I'd like to echo many of Michael's sentiments about this site. I think it's important that we maintain flexibility in how we look at the site in the future and keep this within the urban village. There are a number of residential developments surrounding this area. There's a brand new park that's been built. I think we need to consider the environmental impacts of allowing Reed and Graham to continue to operate in close proximity to the Guadalupe River, which holds, I think, some potential to have some salmon actually run up and down that if we actually get some rainfall this year. But this is a site that should be included in an urban village. The city should use its professional planners to come up with a use that makes sense, and economic development should work with Reed and Graham to find another location within our city that's more appropriate. This is a huge view corridor for our downtown and Diridon Station, and this is a major eyesore for many of the residents of Willow Glen. Thank you.
All right, my eyesight is really being tested. Is it Juan? Is it whose nameplate's up there? Juan Estrada?
Yes, my name is Juan Estrada, and I live in District 5, and referencing the East Capitol Foxdale Drive. So,
Pull it forward, yeah, there you go.
so my assumption would be that when this was designated for urban village status, that the 114 rental housing units for low-income families were not intended to be displaced, and so I would assume, and my assumptions may be way off, that the 170 additional units and 100 jobs would be supplemental. And so I think what I'm reading is that they would displace the units. And so I'm seeking clarification as if that was the original intent. And so now we're saying, no, that's a bad idea. And especially also then, is it possible to still add 100 jobs to this location without displacing anything and or add additional units? Because if it's possible to add additional residential and jobs and not displace, I don't see why we would not want to do that.
I think I believe the site, the urban village itself, the general plan land use designation is for commercial, so there could be more, commercial uses could be developed there in the future. Kind of, how we looked at that, this is an existing deed-restricted, affordable housing for family. So by, with the urban village designation would signal future redevelopment of the village itself and displacement of those residents, which is, largely the reason we're recommending eliminating this urban village. If the site was designated for residential uses in that sense, then it would be able to, you could develop residential there in the future, but that's not the case. The land use designation is for commercial.
So the original intent would have been to displace the 114 units and replace it with 170?
The original intent? So I don't know what the original intent was. I was on this part of this body that was preparing this plan, and I think at this point I was not working. I was working on the Diridon specific plan. So I don't think there was an intent when we did these villages. I don't believe staff went and looked at, oh, this is an affordable deed restricted project. We shouldn't, you know, we want to get rid of that or not. I think they just looked at it as an opportunity of like, these are relatively lower density apartments. At some point in time, this could redevelop with higher density development. That DaVita Dialysis Center was not there at the time. It was a vacant lot. And so there was just, I think, so in other words, we didn't dig at that micro level to understand the specific site. It was kind of more broad brush.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the boundaries?
Or is it ASIN or Tomago? I can't tell. Oh, ASIN.
Okay.
These are small little nameplates. It's hard to
Yeah,
tell.
just a couple questions for staff and then a couple of comments on the boundaries. But first, I really just wanted to get a sense of how much of the affordable housing that has been produced in the last 8 years or so have been in the current urban villages. Sorry, I didn't see it in the presentation about the progress.
Yeah, we can follow up on that in terms of the exact numbers that have been built
Ryan, could
in
you
urban
remind us of
village.
what the urban village, sorry to interrupt, remind us of what the goals were for the entire urban villages.
25%, and that was established last 4-year review. A goal of 25% of housing within urban villages would be affordable.
And then as far as the boundaries are concerned, can we go back to the Race Street side? So I actually drive or ride my bike around this area a lot, and unless I'm mistaken, there's that in the area east of Lincoln Avenue, west of the Reed Graham site, isn't it like a bank and a brewery?
Are you talking about HAPA?
But I think there's the bank to the CE.
There could be, a bank is allowed in that general plan designation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand the rationale for the Reed Graham site, but I'm really struggling to understand the rationale for the area east of Lincoln and west of Reed and Graham site.
So the area east of Lincoln is, again, it's combined industrial commercial, so it's not just industrial uses that are allowed, it's commercial as well. And so the idea is if Reed and Graham were to remain, it's really, so CIC kind of allows anything but residential, basically. And so the idea is that it's probably not ideal to put residential right up against Reed and Graham. By being CIC, it facilitates a lot of uses. For example, I can't remember what the building's called. Barry Swenson owns it, but it's got HAPA and Good Karma and what's that? I couldn't hear that, but anyway, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. And so that building is just north of the brown hatched area on the other side of the railroad tracks. So it could support those kind of things as well.
And then the other one is the Monterey Road at the Capitol Caltrain Station.
Could you speak into the mic, please?
The Monterey Road at the Caltrain station. Is it because it abuts single-family homes that it's such a small strip, or were you thinking about potentially expanding that urban village?
Yeah, that's correct. The boundary there is that's largely commercial uses there, and then the rest of the land uses east of that are residential, or existing residential uses. The uses within the blue hatch there are kind of they're current commercial uses. There's a used car dealership, a couple restaurants, and some other, and the park and ride lot, right, for the Caltrain station is located there as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Kevin Swick.
So I just want to add my 2 cents too about the race site and the race light rail. You know, I go to that Del Monte Park all the time with my dog and take my kids, take my son to play soccer on the soccer fields. And when, you know, we're hanging around with families, we did his birthday party there. Like a major comment was, this is a beautiful, wonderful park. And in most other cities, you'd find a park like this surrounded all around it by, you know, the type of higher density housing we see to the north of it. And everyone's just like, why, you know, why is there the industrial site to the south? So I understand the reasoning behind it and the reasoning here, but I just think there could be other places to locate the heavier industrial site and not lose this opportunity to create a great urban surrounding around that park. And then second, on the East Capitol Foxdale Drive, I was like happily surprised to see this in here as one of the sites being removed because I was concerned that there were some of these sprinkled urban village sites that either encompassed below market rate housing, rent restricted housing, housing covered by the apartment rent ordinance, or mobile home parks. And I think if this is a move to look and say, are these sites, you know, including these sites in urban villages without a strong anti-displacement policy in the city, we're just tempting the fate of losing the existing affordable homes that we have. So I glad, from what I understand, to see this removed. And it made me think, are there other small sites like this that are mostly just mobile home parks or other types of sites that we should be looking at also that have this same characteristic?
Just to answer that question, we have not found other sites. This is kind of a unique case where it's, most urban villages are commercial uses, so.
All right, Melanie Griswold.
So I just want to also, I guess, add to the comments about the Race Street site. And so one of the things that I'm struck by is that we have this bright line rule, it seems like, of not converting industrial to residential, but not all industrial uses are appropriate in every location. And this is a particularly important location, and it's also one where I think that the economics of development support development, and it's one of the few places in the city where that actually seems to hold true, that that developers can actually build housing. So it's one of those sites where I think we should look closely at. The other aspect is in terms of the unsuitability of redevelopment, one of the things that's cited is the neighborhood community commercial designation, but presumably that could change during the urban village planning process. So citing a current designation as why it's unsuitable is not necessarily a reason to take it out of the urban village. And the other aspect that gave me some concern was that, at least with the Reed and Graham site, it seems that one of the reasons it's being cited to keep it is that there's really a public use for the asphalt, but it's a private landowner and a private site. And so putting restrictions to take it out, or I suppose taking it out of the urban village with this idea that we're going to somehow through land use have a private landowner continue that usage doesn't seem to be the right thing to be doing for planning. So that's just my 2 cents on the Ray Street.
Okay, we're gonna not seeing any other.
Yeah, Paso, Sado, Harvey, and Jesse.
Where do you want to go?
Okay, sorry.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I want to talk about the Reed and Graham and the race boundary as well. I agree with many of the comments that have been made so far. You know, Lincoln Avenue is a key arterial into the whole Willow Glen area, which is in extremely close proximity to the whole Google campus development that's going to be taking place. So I expect and predict that we will see more demand for housing in that area. Taking these properties outside of the urban village, we lose that opportunity from a long-term perspective to potentially add additional housing into the area, which is going to be definitely needed as we move along. The properties are in extremely close proximity to light rail. And we, over the last few years, have expended a great amount of investment in building housing on the Sobrato property, the office and light industrial that he's had, obviously the one that is over by Swenson and Urban, you, Michael, you folks. So I really have to object to the idea that we need to take these properties out. Reed and Graham has been making asphalt there for a very long time. That's fine, but maybe it is time for them to find another place, and I think the city needs to help them do that. Environmentally, we are turning that area into a residential area. Also, another item we're going to cover down the road in our meetings is neighborhood business districts. Can they begin to accommodate some opportunity housing sites? Again, Lincoln Avenue was mentioned in that discussion. So obviously, staff is looking at this area from both perspectives. And I would say we need to really not take this out of the urban village concept and let it play out over the next few years. We can always revisit that in 4 years to see where we're at.
All right, thank you, Pat. Harvey?
I want to second all the comments on Reed and Graham, and I want to give a personal view of this. I've lived in North Willow Glen since 1983. We're downwind from the Reed and Graham site. I've noticed in my lifetime, since age 32, that my house, my cars, everything gets a very sticky black soot on it very quickly. No matter how I clean it, it's there. So there's been pollution coming from that area for quite some time. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed, never smoked, with emphysema. So we are building all this housing around there. We have the Los Gatos Creek Trail goes against the mountain of asphalt that you can see from the trail. I think that it's time that we encourage Reed and Graham to find a place that is not surrounded by 10,000 units of housing, and a park, and a trail.
All right, thank you, Harvey. Michelle Yesney?
Excuse me. We're talking about taking, this is Reed and Graham, about taking a resource that is essential to urban development. We use the material, we need the material, and we have made it a profitable business over the years. We need it, but we don't want to have to live with this nasty, unpleasant thing right in the middle of where we are. We want it to go somewhere else. So we're going to have to face a number of decisions here, and just telling Reed and Graham, go find a better spot, isn't going to do it. We're going to have to help them find a better spot, or we're going to have to pay the long-term costs of producing that material. And the long-term costs include, as pointed out by staff, transporting it a long distance, or like with the landfills and the garbage processing and all the other unpleasant urban uses that we need, we've got to deal with where we're going to put them. Maybe we should just invent something so we don't need asphalt anymore. But this, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't do it, because I still need to think about it like the rest of us. But if we're going to make this land use decision, let's make it clear. We want to get rid of this nasty, stinky business and put a bunch of poor people on here, because affordable housing is what we need. And we're talking about a site that's badly polluted and slam up against the freeway, so it's noisy, dirty, and probably contaminated with toxins. So we've got to look at the whole decision and where we're going to put it. We're going to put it in San Jose, or we're going to try to make some poor community in the Santa Cruz Hills take it. But we have to take responsibility for the whole decision, not just the first part.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to make a suggestion. We still have a number of other things to cover
Right.
in our urban village policy. And tonight's main agenda was not the boundaries for Reed and Graham, but
Right. Exactly.
I am going to call on everyone else, but I want us to also keep in mind there's people from the public here who want to be heard, and we have to get through the other issues on this. There's some very important issues we
Yes.
need to talk about: urban villages, the poll, the horizons. Do we still want to stick with
Signature
horizons?
projects.
And signature projects. So I want to make sure we have enough time for those as well. So we're going to finish up just this boundary issue. We're going to shift to those other issues shortly. If your comment is just a Me Too thing,
Right.
try to keep it to Me Too, and that way we'll have more time for the other issues that we have to discuss. So Councilmember Davis?
Thank you. It is a Me Too for the Ray Street boundary that all of my colleagues have stated, or most of my colleagues have stated. I'd also like to point out that Reading Graham is looking to move and has been actively looking to move out of that area. There are a number of industrial, they're not the only ones in and around that area that are looking to move because they don't want to be next to housing and recreation, and they feel that it is actually unsafe for them to be there. They don't like the liability. So Reading Graham is looking to move, and I think we need to keep that area in our urban village so we have a plan for it when they do move.
Okay. Jesse O'Malley Solis?
Quick echo on all the comments on Reading Graham, but I wanted to talk further on boundaries associated with urban village plans that have fixed rail and or high-frequency transit nearby. These urban village plan boundaries are very arbitrary. We are not capturing full walk and bike sheds, and I would like staff to look at capturing walk and bike sheds at all these transit locations.
Okay. So let's, okay, two
There are
more.
3 more.
Is this on the boundary issue for the folks who still have their nameplates up? Yes?
See, Juan, Asen, and, well, Melanie, you haven't put yours down yet. I think it's just Juan and Asen. Okay, and Pat, likewise.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Uh,
So Juan.
No, I just had a question about the Capitol Expressway site.
Go ahead.
So as we remove it, I totally agree that it should be removed and no one should be displaced. Then I wonder if there's an opportunity for, and if this body in the future or staff will recommend additional urban villages for that area, given that Light Row will be extended to Eastridge. This is right near Story Road. Are there other areas where urban village designation could be set with future zoning decided at a later time?
I mean, the big area that's a potential urban village type of thing is the Reed Hillview Airport. So that's something the county is pursuing closing down, and there's conversations happening soon about what would the future of that look like. So that would sort of be the mother of all urban villages, but that is a potential urban village.
Thank you.
Anyone else on boundaries?
Asen, or is it Eric?
Eric?
Schoenhauer. I just want to say I'm offended that these items are even on the agenda.
Okay.
We have serious policy issues we should be talking about that impact the future of the city and real housing production, and why we've spent 40 minutes on what are totally insignificant issues for the future of the city. These shouldn't have even been on the agenda. They should be removed from the agenda, and let's get on with real policy discussions that actually get housing built.
Okay. It was part of the council direction, so that's why we're dealing with this issue.
The
But-
staff decided which boundaries to bring forward. The council just said, consider boundaries. They didn't say, go look at Reed and Graham. They didn't say, go look at Foxdale or whatever that is. Those are meaningless, insignificant urban village boundaries. And the fact that we've now wasted over 40 minutes and that having to talk about it is ridiculous. Let's get on with it.
All right, thank you, Eric. We're going to go on to the other recommendations in here, and I'm going to group them together because they're interrelated. You'll see on page 11, there's the recommendation about horizons with respect to 2 urban villages. On the next page, on page 12, there's the recommendation about the residential pool policy, which relates to the horizons. And then on page 13, there are the staff recommendations on policy 5.5 relating to urban village planning, implementation, and signature project policy. I'm going to put these all together because they're interrelated with the concept of horizons and moving projects forward and the criteria for signature projects. I know there's been some discussion, I know we got a letter from Spur suggesting that the basis for the horizons doesn't necessarily apply anymore, and that we should drop the whole horizon idea together. So let's put these interrelated topics together and take some comments on that. And I see Leslie, you have yours up? Okay.
Yes, thank you. I totally agree with Spur on the urban villages, and I guess one question that I have for the staff is that we fully expect that the regional housing need allocation for the next round, which we expect will be coming maybe before this task force ends its work, but sometime next year, will more than double the amount of housing that we need to, as a city, plan for. And in the one slide, it did say that the current land does accommodate the current RENA goal, but we need to be able to accommodate at least twice as many. And I don't think we can do that without opening up the urban village horizons and looking at many different opportunities to do that. So I'd really recommend, I don't think that we cannot look at that issue.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. Eric, do you have your plate up there? Okay.
So we're discussing all of the remaining items?
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, we need to understand that the system's not working, that the implementation policies of the general plan have been a total failure in the production of housing. And let's quickly just look at the data. So the general plan capacity was for 120,000 units over 29 years. That averages 4,138 units per year was the planned capacity. The RENA goal for the city in the current term is 3,500 units per year. The City Council has adopted a new goal of 5,000 units per year over 5 years. How many units did the city produce in the full calendar year of 2018? 2,973 units. 2,973 units. We're not meeting the RENA goal. We're not meeting the general plan capacity. We're not meeting any of the housing production objectives, and we're facing the results of that. Record rents, record sales prices, and people living on the street. Why is that important? Because these horizon methodologies were designed to stop housing production. So why are we continuing to keep this horizon methodology in the general plan that was designed in 2011 to stop housing production? Get rid of it. Abandon it completely. Moving on to the pool, I have a question, maybe staff can answer. If we eliminate the pool, does that mean that projects can go forward in urban villages without constraint of a pool? Is it just open-ended now? If so, that's a good change to the policy. On the signature project criteria, the staff is going backwards. So we've heard loud and clear that one of the big hurdles to mixed-use development is overly large commercial requirements within the mixed-use development. And so staff is now saying, let's take the current policy and make you do 10%, 15%, or 25% more commercial within it. So it's totally going the wrong direction in that regard, and we should just stick with the policy we have, which is meet the average jobs that were planned in that urban village. And I think that's all I had. Oh, and also on the urban village signature project criteria, why do we have such prescriptive things that a parcel has to be 150 feet wide? What if I bring you a parcel that's 149 feet? Why does it have to be 3 acres? What if I bring you a parcel that's 2.78 acres? It's absurd. And this is why we don't have housing production in the city. get rid of it.
All right, thank you, Eric. Who's next? Roberta?
Yeah. I'm not a developer. I don't represent a developer. And what he said about the commercial requirements stands out as a huge red flag in blocking development.
Okay.
So I have a couple of questions and then comments. First on questions. Can you remind me and then I think everyone here, what are kind of the goals around community benefits or value capture tools within the urban villages currently? And then what are some changes or potentially planned actions by council to be able to pay for, things like trees or new lighting or for affordable housing?
So there are no value capture mechanisms in urban villages anymore. There was a council-approved urban village implementation strategy that state law has, what shall I say, put in the garbage can. There isn't anything now. We have the standard parks impact fees, and there's inclusionary housing. Yeah.
And the traffic impact.
And then there's things that the development will do. It's just a standard practice in terms of sidewalks and improvements to the public right of way. But we are looking at coming up with Urban Village Implementation 2.0 that would have a much more limited palette of things that can be selected, and it would be baked into the zoning code.
Okay. So I'm assuming, as part of the tools that we used to have, we actually had some actual goals for improving the environment around the production of either housing or commercial development, including, getting some wider sidewalks, getting some parklets, trying to fund some affordable housing. You just mentioned some of the things that you're thinking about, but do you have any suggestions on what would be more effective tools for value capture in order to be able to fund those kinds of community benefits?
So we're exploring that. I think, and this is kind of a little bit outside of the scope of this four-year review, but we are looking essentially at baking into the zoning code sort of requirements. For example, that a project would need to provide a popo, which is not a cute, fluffy animal, but a publicly accessible, privately owned open space of a certain size. Public art, other types of things that be very clear, so there's no, so it's just very clear to everybody, the community developer, what could be expected, and it would likely be a menu of items that would be, the developer might suggest, there'd be a conversation with the community about which on the menu of items the development would propose. But we are in the early stages of doing that, so we're just kind of beginning that journey.
And I think hopefully as part of this process, we can start thinking about ways that we're actually going to be able to meet some of those community goals, as well as trying to fund some of that affordable housing. I know you guys, the planning department doesn't have that information right there at the ready, but at least for the last time I looked, I think we're pretty far behind on that 25% goal at least in the housing that's been produced so far. And then just to be clear on where we're at as far as RENA is concerned, and obviously there are some disagreements about whether or not RENA is a good reflection of actual housing needs, but just to say, we are at 81% for the entire RENA council cycle for market rate housing. We're at 19% for affordable, but if you look at it on a year-to-year basis, in some cases we're at 162% of the yearly goal for market rate housing, or in 7% of the affordable housing goal on an average year. And then now I just want to address a couple of things I think I might have heard recently. So on the ground floor retail requirement, this is just for signature projects that are trying to get a planning approval outside of the current allowed uses.
Outside of the current either horizon or, it doesn't have an urban village plan, it's outside of the
So
horizon.
these are for like special cases?
Correct.
Okay, and so we're trying to get exceptional projects.
Correct.
In this case, right? And so we're trying to raise the standards for those kinds of projects. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes.
Okay, just to be clear.
Okay. So I see there's a number of other cards that are up that people wish to comment from the task force, and we will get to those. But what I'm going to do is, we've had members of the public sitting here patiently waiting to comment as well. So I'm going to invite that now. We'll pick up afterwards with the remainder of the task force comments. So if you're interested in addressing the urban village issue, you're welcome to approach the microphone now. Now's the time to do so. Please line up and identify yourself. And if you can keep your comments to 2 minutes or less, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Janica Kleiman. I'm a resident of District 6, and I also own property right near Reading Graham. So I do also think that with the growth that's happening in that area, to see that continue to be industrial, heavy industrial, which actually, to your point, is very dirty. We do have a great park right now, but I worry for that park. So I would like for that to be revisited. So I was really glad to hear multiple people state that, as that is a concern of mine too. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Aaron Eckhouse. I'm the Regional Organizing Director for California YIMBY, Yes in My Backyard. I had a couple of questions really about some of the scope issues for this process. Questions and comments. I don't know if this would be an appropriate time to raise those.
Yes, you can state the questions. We're not going to answer them now, but
Sure.
we'll have a response at an appropriate time.
So one question is, I've heard some discussion about reallocating housing capacity from one part of the city to another. I'm wondering if there's going to be, in the scope of this, the possibility to raise and add new housing capacity through the city, which I think is something that we desperately need. And then second is about the growth in West San Jose. I was very excited to see that some of the urban villages that council has moved from Horizon 3 up are in West San Jose, because there is feasibility analysis showing that that is the most viable place in the city right now to add new apartments. That's with current land costs, current development costs, current requirements for things like affordable housing. And if we want to add new homes and get shovels in the ground, West San Jose is a great place for us to look. It comes with a lot of other benefits as well. Residents in West San Jose would enjoy cleaner air, better access to Silicon Valley job centers, being cited in top performing public school districts. These are all reasons that the area is identified very highly on ratings of neighborhood opportunity by places like the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society at UC Berkeley. Allowing new apartments in West San Jose would help reverse historic patterns of segregation and exclusion in San Jose. And again, it is the most viable place for us to create new homes right now and start closing our housing shortage. So I hope that there will be some scope in this as well to look at increasing capacity for new apartments in West San Jose.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
I was just Tessa Woodman C. talking about the general plan, how it's affected our neighborhood and how we haven't been outreach to our neighborhood of the general plan changes, and how that has really impacted our Garden Alameda as they have decided to put a commercial hotel in our residential neighborhood. And with this particular zoning, which is NCC, we have no chance of residential. We would like a urban village type of maybe mixed use. We could have that, but we prefer residential. And the issue is, as we look at climate change and ecological collapse, 11,000 scientists are warning us that our goals need to shift from gross domestic product growth or jobs as been the orientation of our Vision 2040. And we're going into the 2040, where 2050, we're talking about sea level rise, which has increased 3 times. So we're really having to think about what they're saying, the scientists, about how we're developing our city. And the pursuit of affluence towards sustaining, we have to go away from the pursuit of affluence and the pursuit of jobs, towards sustaining ecosystems and improving human well-being by prioritizing basic needs, housing, food security, food sovereignty, and reducing inequality.
All right, thank you very much. Larry?
Yeah, Larry Ames. I'm so glad and proud for San Jose for saving Coyote Valley. It was discussed in the first time you drafted this thing in 2011, so now you get to finalize it. Yay. Affordable housing is a great goal, but please do it well with designing well-designed buildings in a sustainable manner. Do not try to reduce costs by skimping on services. The people need parks and open spaces, plazas, and so forth. Everybody needs to be able to get outdoors and get some fresh air and exercise and socialize. And regarding Reed and Graham, I thought it was already a development entitled or something like that. I appreciate the need for asphalt and business taxes, but personally and selfishly, I'm hoping that it will go away because the Los Gatos Creek Trail will be so much nicer without that there. And also, I'm hoping that Lincoln Avenue would be a enticing walkway from the Midtown development to the shops of Willow Glen. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Robert Chapman Wood. I'm professor of strategic management at San Jose State.
And I believe we received a letter from you as well?
Yes, you did. That's
All
right. I just want to speak in favor of really Mr. Schoenauer's comments that we need a transformed approach to housing in the general plan. And the mayor endorsed SB 50, which I actually personally think was too radical. But what the staff's understanding of what this review is about seems completely inconsistent with what the mayor has said he thinks is needed. By setting unrealistically low limits on housing units, the plan has contributed to homelessness and poverty and pollution. It's very difficult to figure out how people can be satisfied with 14,000 new homes going with 80,000 new jobs. And then be surprised that we have a lot of homelessness.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Jerry.
Good evening, Jerry DeYoung, Ruth and Gwen. I'd like to start by thanking all of you for all the time you're going to put in, and I hope that you're all sitting here 6 or 8 months from now. Stick with it. It's not an easy job. What I wanted to tell you was that I'm trying to think about looking at all of who you are and listening to who you are in terms of your background. It's a wonderful group of people who can rely on each other. And when I'm sitting here tonight listening to some of the very strong statements that are coming out, and I would encourage you, as you talk about the policies they may bring forward, think of the chilling effect that some of these policies have on the development. You've heard people talk about how much housing we need. You all believe that housing and the rest of the development in the community is very important. Some of the policies, and Eric is quite capable of pointing out the chilling effect that some of these policies that sound very good have. You're going to be drawn to them. We should have more commercial in a residential project. And yet we have people who understand clearly, and some of the homeless housing advocates understand that commercial is a dead space in their building. They have to support it, and it could probably get more residential units if they didn't have to put that same housing in. I would encourage you, some of you who do not understand the development process, to take advantage of the people in this room. If you will, get to know them, find out why they think a policy is not going to be the outcome that you're looking for. We need to encourage development. We don't need to regulate more development. We don't need more regulation on development. So I would ask you as you move forward to think that way and not see every policy that the planning staff puts in front of you as the panacea to a problem. It will not be. We found out that Envision 2040 hasn't reached many of the goals that they wanted to. It may be because they were ill thought out or not properly done in the first place. You have an opportunity to rectify some of that. I hope you're here at the end. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to continue with the task force discussion on the urban village issue, and I might make a suggestion. It's just a suggestion that we have both the Horizon issue and the signature project issue to talk about. Many of you will recall the signature project concept was developed as an exception to accelerate a project in its planning and its horizon. The fundamental issue is, what do you all think of the horizons now? Have things changed such since the last review in our original plan? Is that a concept that you think needs to be changed? And if that needs to be changed, then maybe we can simplify some of the discussion about signature projects. So if you're interested, as I call on you, share your opinions about the Horizon issue. So is that yours, Kevin, or is that yours, Melanie? Who's got that plate up here on the right? Melanie? Yeah. Okay.
So my comment is about the implementation of the signature project. I echo Eric's comments as well. But one of the things that I see in some of the implementation, which I think is going to be something that we see in a lot of different policies, is the emphasis on dwelling units. And dwelling units is something that we're moving to co-living, we're moving to these different types of living arrangements, and it's an artificial construct that really doesn't square with form-based planning. And so what I would like to see us do is focus more on a floor area ratio, how much square footage do we want of residential, as opposed to how many particular dwelling units, because that's both constraining and not limiting enough in certain circumstances. So it creates too many regulations and limitations on the flexibility that we need to provide different types of housing opportunities. So that would be my suggestion for whether it's in the signature project or in other areas of the general plan, is to focus more on that.
All right, thank you. Pat?
Yes, I have two comments briefly. Horizons. I believe we need to eliminate the horizons. I agree with Spur and Leslie, and BIA has felt for a long time that the horizons have been an impediment to allow much-needed housing to move forward and get built. On the signature, I share from the home builder and also commercial the concern about increasing the square footage for commercial in our signature urban village projects. It's extremely challenging to meet that current commercial component. We're trying to get housing built. There already are spots that we would see projects come forward, can't meet the square footage, can't pencil, doesn't work. I say Eric's concern that he raised on that is a very valid one.
Thank you, Pat. Harvey?
I would disagree on the horizons. I think the horizons were put in place so that we could make sure that we get the VMT, the vehicle miles traveled, down. We were put most of the Horizon 1 villages along the greatest transportation corridors. I think that it is helpful to have the signature projects because then to move it up in horizons gives you a much better product. I know we're in a problem, have a problem with housing, but the housing problem is not San Jose's to solve for the entire valley. The problem that we have is that we don't have enough jobs here. We still have when I did this in 2007, we had 0.82 jobs per employed resident. We still have 0.82 jobs per employed resident. Had we built far more housing, we would have even less. So I think that we need to keep the horizons in place. I think we need to move up the projects that they suggest, the villages suggested for whatever reasons, but I think we need some kind of incentive.
Thank you, Harvey. Councilmember Reynes?
Thank you, Chair. So my comment is about Spur's letter, and this is for staff, and this is about this item, the last item, and, well, the two items that we're speaking about currently. I'd like to see your response to Spur's suggestion in the letters so that we can get some feedback from you in terms of limitations or any response that you have. And hopefully some of that could get incorporated ultimately into a recommendation, because I think a lot of what I'm hearing is we're kind of heading into what Spur is already recommending. Well, some of us are, maybe.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Foley?
May I?
Yes, please.
I want to echo the comments about eliminating the horizons. It seems an arbitrary way to control development in the city. Projects are going to be built where land is available, where development is meant to occur, where opportunities are there for developers, and to have these horizons and then the signature project that can actually jump over a horizon just doesn't make sense. I'd like to see the elimination of the horizons altogether.
Commissioner Ballard? Oh. Oh, sorry.
Real quickly, I support the collapse of the horizons, but if we don't go that far, I definitely would like to see movement of all high-frequency transit urban village plans or with close proximity to urban village plans, those all move to Horizon 1. That is not the case today. Secondly, I just want to applaud staff's recommendations on eliminating the cap to the pool. I think that's a valuable tool. I also really like the movement to the one body of approval versus two in the signature review process. I think both of those are really good moves on staff's part.
Okay. Shiloh?
I have 3 comments. On the horizons issue, I agree with the different sides of this. And I think back to when we were on the general plan task force, and we had a rationale for why we decided upon horizons, which was what Harvey was talking about. And so I think it would be useful to hear a little bit more from staff to reflect on why we decided, why we liked that rationale, why we put the horizons in place, and why now we feel it might not be useful. I mean, I'm a believer that we set policy, we set guidelines that then help the market figure out what's profitable and what's not based on those policies. And if we are clearly signaling to the development community, as we have with a thou shalt not convert industrial land kind of policy, right? Like that was a hard, bright line in the sand that we held to and we have been holding to. It's those kinds of policy decisions where if we stick to it, the market responds and says, all right, I got it. I'm not going to hire the best consultant here, Eric Schoenauer, to navigate the process and get industrial land converted, right? So my point being, there was a rationale. I think it's important to understand what that was, understand our current context, and then what I wanted to overlay on that as well, which I think is not a new context, but one that I think a lot of us shamefully are more aware of. And that's something that, or embarrassingly are more aware of, and that's something that Kevin brought up, I think, with the Foxdale apartments, and we were getting some information from staff that, hey, look, we don't want to displace poor people that are here, and so let's take this one out. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I wonder if we were to look at our urban villages and the horizons through more of an equity lens, if that might help inform our decisions in a little different way as well. So I would look to staff to just kind of bring us a little more information on some of that. 2 other comments are much more brief. One is on the signature projects. Again, there was a reason for this. We wanted really super special things. We wanted to not necessarily limit the creativity of the development community, and so when we're getting more prescriptive and we're saying 140 feet versus 141 feet, I start to cringe a little bit, and so the whole being more prescriptive is something that I'm not necessarily in favor of. And then the last thing I'll say is I have been a little disappointed on the Planning Commission seeing the signature projects come forward and asking about the community engagement strategy, because that was something that was supposed to be signature as well. Let's do, you developer, show us what you've got in terms of bringing the community in, and it tended to be the same old, same old. And what I saw here was like do 2 community meetings. And to me, that's not community engagement. So I would, and again, I don't want to be prescriptive of the development community, but I want to say, like, show us what you got in terms of like bringing the community in, working with, and figuring out a great project.
All right. Thank you, Shiloh. Jason?
Thank you, Chair. I have one comment, and I wonder if it's enough time to respond now or later. But it seems like the horizons and the signature projects elements are tied together. If the signature projects, to my understanding, is to kind of skip that horizon order. If the horizons collapses, does that mean there's no need for the signature project process?
No, there's still a need for a signature project.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Bonnie?
So I'm always asking, what's the problem we're trying to solve, right? So I think we should accelerate the horizons, but not collapse them, because acceleration would allow us to solve part of the problem that we have without collapsing completely the rules around it, which is the jobs to employed residents ratio, which is what Harvey's talking about, right? If we continue to want that rationale, then we want to accelerate, move faster, but not eliminate. And that also is with the signature projects as well. We want to accelerate them, so I agree with we want more flexibility. We don't want to be prescriptive, but we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater by having no criteria altogether. So once again, accelerate, don't collapse, and allow flexibility, but don't completely abolish everything that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Jim?
Okay, so Bonnie stole my question. What's the problem we're trying to solve? Are we still trying to solve the same problem? If I remember correctly, that problem was the jobs, housing imbalance. Is that something we still want to address? And that's what we really need to understand. Based on that, I can make a better decision. The second thing is tax base. I understand that part of the reason for commercial was to help balance that tax base, because without a tax base, we just keep passing taxes on to the residents and to fund our services. So I would like to get an idea of, and I'm all for housing. I understand that need. I think we do need to accelerate the ability to build the houses, but I also want to understand, as part of that solution, how do we also accelerate the ability to generate the taxes that we need to provide the services?
Michael?
Abolish the horizon per the Spur memo. It's too much common sense. It's like I'm on Fantasy Island when I read this from 2007. I'm waiting for Ricardo Montalban to tell me where I'm at. This task force in 2007 was created to control housing, and now look where we're at. Look where we're at. We have to have just common sense policies. This one's easy. Signature project. I have a signature project I'm working on, 0.16 FAR. That's 18,730 commercial space, 230 units on a light rail station. I can't even fit it in. And then we forget that retailers have some type of parking requirement. Cities have some type of parking requirement. It's just, if you want a signature project, fine. Have plazas, have sustainability aspects to it, have connections to trails. But don't tell me that you're going to create all your jobs and solve all your problems with you haven't even moved the needle at all on your jobs, housing balance. You've had this since 2007. As Eric said, this general plan is a failure. Wake up.
All right. Thank you for the positive comments. Vince Rocha?
So I think Spur's memo, I want to agree with that on both pool and the horizons. But second, I think there's also some underlying tensions here, right, around the fiscal sustainability of the city. But my understanding is at higher densities, the housing scores better fiscally. So as we look at our urban village process and how we dedicate, how much commercial space, how much housing, as we get denser and we give more density to the developer, we should consider that in this signature process and other just urban villages, period, outside of the signature process. I looked at some of the minimum densities here, 35 units per acre in some of these villages. Is that a village? Is that dense? Along bus corridors that we want high, we want people to take BRT, bus rapid transit. BRT and rail, no matter what kind of transit you have, really does need density to support it. So I think as we look at this lens, let's look at what are the density maximums we're imposing in some of these villages, not just the density minimums, and should we be raising the floor on the density minimums here? Again, for both the fiscal sustainability and the housing supply shortage we have.
All right, thank you. Sean?
I think the facts have changed. Since we started this first general plan in 2007, we had a different sort of housing crisis. We're in the midst of a global recession. Housing had tanked. I think the city took some prudent steps to make sure that we had jobs going forward. And guess what, folks? I've got some good news. So by my calculations, we've got about 20 million square feet of office product that could be coming into downtown San Jose. The bad news is that 20 million square feet of office is going to generate the need for probably 50,000 housing units. So I'll ask the council members, which one of you wants those housing units in your district? So one of the things that we did right in the general plan the first time is we identified priority development areas. So let's keep those priority development areas. Let's get rid of horizons, and let's build some housing. One of the reasons why the states come down so hard on cities and local control is that we had the capacity for homes, but we didn't have the ability to deliver those homes. The city of San Jose produces some of the lowest housing permits in the western United States. The city of Seattle is about 250,000 people less than the city of San Jose. They deliver 3 times the number of housing units, and their housing is a lot more affordable. There's a lot of good things that were done in the general plan, but the facts have changed. We've got to change course, and we've got to make corrections. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Eddie?
Good evening. Eddie Trong with the Silicon Valley Organization. I support the elimination of the planning horizons. I see the planning horizons as an attempt to reverse market forces. We're in the middle of one of the greatest economic expansions that we've seen, and we have not really seen any housing units being built. And the result of that is growing displacement due to rent inflation that will continue to grow. Since 2010, rents have doubled in the city of San Jose. And I think that we really need to figure out a way to relax the regulations out there, because the economic headwinds are going to change. And when they change, it doesn't matter if you eliminate the planning horizons 3 or 4 years from now, because we're not going to see the financing capabilities to get more housing. And so the time is now to really make the changes today if we really want to make an impact in the housing crisis. And the third point I really want to make is that we really need a general plan that is consistent with the realities of the marketplace. And what that means is that if there's market demand to build housing that can help us address our goals to address the housing crisis, we shouldn't get in the way of that. And that's exactly what Planning Horizons does, and we need to relook at that.
All right, thank you, Eddie. Juan?
So I agree on the need to revisit horizons and appreciate the work that staff did, and wonder if next time they could recommend whether to eliminate or accelerate. And then in terms of the lack of flexibility with all the requirements, then I agree that if more flexibility is available, it could incentivize more development, which would help all of us. And so I don't know if it's possible for staff to recommend A and B, so that we have another option. And those are all my comments.
All right. All right, there's been a lot of food for thought here. There's been some questions posed to staff as well. We're not going to answer those questions now. As you know, at the next agenda, this is the first item that's going to be on our next meeting agenda, which is December the 18th. So anticipate in that packet, you'll see answers to some of the questions that have been posed here, as well as some recommendations regarding the items that we discussed. So I said I was going to save the one thing I like about San Jose, or one of the things for the end of the meeting.
People have opinions?
Yeah. Yeah. It's Shirley Lewis. Shirley Lewis, who, as you know, was co-chair of this, the last update, as well as the general plan. Shirley's not here with us in person, but she's certainly here with us in thought. Shirley loved the future. She loved San Jose, and she was a really powerful force for good planning in the city. And I just wanted to adjourn our meeting in her memory. All right, so we'll see you at the next meeting here on December the 18th. Thank you.
And she was a Spur board member.